Hello, my name is KingK, but you knew that already. That's not my catchphrase, but I could make it my catchphrase, I guess. Final Fantasy VII Remake sucks, and we're here to tell you why. I want you all to introduce yourself now.
And sign off.
Oh my god.
I hit the big red eject button.
That's a joke. Don't leave yet. That's a joke. Because I know somebody out there is taking me seriously.
Oh my god.
For a second there, I was like, this is getting a little too spicy.
Right.
We just going right into this, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going in with those hot takes.
Well, people know who I am, but people need to know who you are. You, the faceless entity I just said. I don't know which one of you want to say something.
I guess I'll go first. Hi everybody. My name is Core Ideas. YouTube channel is, Core Ideas. I do video game and movie analysis, stuff like that. And I'm here really just to both gush and somewhat critique, don't crucify me, Final Fantasy VII Remake. Someone else is allowed to go.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to think. I was seeing if anyone else want to take it. Do we want to, do the, whatchamacallit? Do we want to do the in-depth, personal histories right now along with the introduction, or do we want to do those separately?
You know what? Yeah, sure, I'll go with that. So, my personal history with Final Fantasy VII is sort of mixed. I played Final Fantasy VII up to about the middle of Disc 2 when I was a kid. And I remember loving it a lot. But at the same time, I wasn't really sure of where to go a lot of the time because of the overworld. Because I was used to playing The Legend of Dragoon, and The Legend of Dragoon, the overworld is just literally just a linear straight line.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, where do I go? So much freedom, too much freedom, my brain, And so I just kind of put it off to the side, and I kind of learned about Final Fantasy VII in terms of the characters and the story and the ending through kind of cultural osmosis. I just learned it from watching Final Fantasy VII having children and wiki spots and different things across the years. And it wasn't really until last year that I sat down to play it from beginning to end and really fell in love with the game. There were some things that annoyed the hell out of me being an old school, JRPG, but thankfully due to the 3x speed multiplier and the no random encounters feature, it basically made the game a lot more bearable than it would have been without it. And it took me 2 or 3 tries to beat Sephiroth, and when I finally did it, it was so rewarding. And I could definitely see why a lot of people ended up loving it back in the day. I would probably put it, if I had to make a tier list, probably a A or S on that list. Alongside Final Fantasy 12.
And 9.
And 9, yes. And absolutely 9.
Can't forget 9.
Yeah,
No, can't forget.
But not 10. 10 is B or C. Just gonna go out with that hot take.
I'll defend 10, but that's a different discussion for another day.
Yeah, we would be here for years.
Yeah. New podcast topic. Anyways, I guess I'll pick it up from there. Hi, my name's Ryan Seals. I run a channel called Codex Entry, where I talk about a lot of nerdy shit, do video game essays, do a lot of stuff about Devil May Cry, Capcom, and all of that. That's probably what you know me for if you do know me. And recently I've been doing a lot of stuff on Final Fantasy, a trend that I am planning on continuing in the near future. As for Final Fantasy VII itself, my history with it is basically it wasn't the first game I played by any metric, but you know how you have that thing where you have that game where it might not have been your first game, but it might as well have been in terms of how much it got you into games.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
That was Final Fantasy VII for me. I remember playing it on the PS1 back when I was a kid, and played through it the first time, absolutely fell in love with it, and then I think I must have played it at least another dozen times after that, at bare minimum. So like I absolutely love that game even now. Of course, as I've grown and like I've developed my taste and all of that, I found things about it that I take a bit of issue with, of some minor things that do bug me and that I wish weren't necessarily the way they are. But overall, even now, I think like not only does it still hold up exceptionally well, but it's probably still my favorite Final Fantasy game overall. I don't think it's the best one, because that's 9, but it's my favorite.
Interesting distinction.
Yeah, I can agree with that, yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of what I have coming into this. Like, I am very emotionally invested in this as an idea, as it were.
The concept of Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah.
I love how you clarified the idea. It's like, oh boy, we're gonna get some hot takes on this one.
Oh yeah.
Okay, I guess I'll go next if you're done.
Yep, go for it.
Okay, hello. My name is Daniel Santos, and I run a YouTube channel by the same name. I used to go by Shintai Reviews, if, you might recognize me by that name. I do a combination of videos on anime and video games. My last video, as of this recording at least, was a in-depth analysis on the anime School Days. So I knew I was gonna get a snicker.
This is why can we kick him off for that? Like I don't know if that's something I can sign off
No,
on.
that is something you have to reward, not critique.
Hey, I hate that show, just to be clear. But I wanted to kind of I wanted to bring something interesting to the table in terms of discussion with that show, because it feels like anyone that talks about it just goes, I hate the main character, the ending. So I wanted to show that there's more to discuss, even though I personally don't like the show. But anyways, people typically associate me as the Tales of guy or the Fate guy, even though I haven't made a Fate video in a while. But anyways, as for my connection to Final Fantasy VII, so when I was younger, I had the demo disc for the game for a while, and I didn't play the full game until years later. So for a while, all I had was that demo disc, which was just the first reactor. And I remember playing that over and over and thinking I wonder what the rest of the game is like. Eventually I played through Final Fantasies 8 and 9 and beat them before I got around to 7. I even played some of Final Fantasy 10 before I played 7. And when I did, I distinctly remember being actually kind of mixed on 7 when I first finished it. And it wasn't a game that I truly appreciated until years later. I think I replayed it again. I reflected on it more, and I started to really appreciate what it was that made FF7 really special. And nowadays, I would say that if I were to rank it, it's side by side with FF9 and Tactics, which I think are the cream of the crop, the best Final Fantasies.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'll agree with that. That's a good take.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's me now.
Yes, go ahead.
You're on,
Okay.
man.
So I'm Fox. You probably know me for the channel Foxcade if you know who I am. I do. A lot of people know me for Devil May Cry and character action type videos. Bayonetta, Metal Gear Rising. But I also cover the occasional TV show and anime. It really just depends what is just hitting me at the time. And in terms of Final Fantasy VII, I get to be the weird outlier and say, since I didn't get into console gaming really until the PS2 era, my first exposure to Final Fantasy VII was actually, not counting Kingdom Hearts seeing Cloud, it's actually Dirge of Cerberus.
Oh my god.
But I actually really like that because I was 12 at the time, so it was that perfect I was the target demographic for that game.
Yeah.
That's honestly the best way to play Dirge of Cerberus. Zero context when you're 12.
Yeah, exactly. And then I progressively played the other games because I barely even recognized it as like if it didn't say Final Fantasy VII, I wouldn't have even like thought about it. I just was like, oh, look at this cool like cover, this cool looking guy with his hair and he's got a gun. That was basically my logic for playing it. But then I started playing the other games. I went through FF7 and then I did Crisis Core, and I really like the world of FF7. I think there's a lot of really interesting ideas and details in there, and the story's really well put together. I don't know if I'd put it as my favorite Final Fantasy world series. I think I'd probably put Ivalice over it, or Ivalice. But that's just like personal taste. I do think 7 deserves all the credit it gets because it is a fantastic game and kind of pseudo series.
So great.
Yeah, so yeah, that's my general feelings on 7. It is in the core of my being, but I still really like it.
Mm-hmm. My Final Fantasy history, I'm realizing, is very complicated and very strange. Even to this day, what was the first Final Fantasy product I even interacted with? Probably, technically, is Kingdom Hearts, I guess, but it's not really the same.
I was about to say, there's nothing worse than being introduced to Dirge of Cerberus first, so I think.
But you know what's funny is that my introduction to characters like Cloud and Squall and all of them was because of Kingdom Hearts. So that became what I thought they were supposed to be, which I later learned was definitely not what they were supposed to be. So that was interesting. But I think the first Final Fantasy game I ever played was... I think it was Crisis Core, which is really weird. Like, I don't even know why I wanted Crisis Core, to be honest, but I got it from Blockbuster.
It's because you had a PSP and there were no other games.
Yeah, probably.
Exactly. That's the real reason why.
I fell in love with Crisis Core. I think it has Final Fantasy VII in the title, right?
Yeah,
but
I think so. Yeah.
Yes.
I didn't really think it was like. I knew Cloud was there, but like I guess as a kid I didn't really register that it was like a prequel at all. Like. I just thought it was some weird like spin-off thing. So
a Kingdom Hearts spin-off?
Like, I wasn't quite that far gone. I knew Cloud was from Final Fantasy VII. I just didn't like. I had no idea what the plot was for Final Fantasy VII. Besides, Sephiroth was the villain of it, and Cloud was in it.
You were aware of the cultural osmosis stuff, but nothing outside of that.
Yeah, like I didn't know that there was a fucking cat thing, which I still don't know much about. Because, spoiler, I have never finished Final Fantasy VII, but when I finished Crisis Core for the first time, I was like, typical like 10-year-old, like this is the best game ever, like because I was just so enamored by the ending of it, and I'm like, wow, Zack's like the best. And to be clear, I still love Zack because of that game, but I don't know how I feel about the game anymore. But as a kid, I was like, yeah, I love this. But for some reason, that never spawned into like, maybe I should go check out Final Fantasy VII, because I just never really did. I was just like, Crisis Core's fine enough. I don't need anything else.
How did it feel seeing Cloud in Kingdom Hearts portrayed as that really dark, brooding, you are my darkness character, to seeing him in Crisis Core where he's just so like, hi, I'm Cloud, I'm a bubbly teen?
Well, see, that was my first suspicion that something was very off, like, about the way he was in Kingdom Hearts, that even though I had no experience with Final Fantasy VII, playing Kingdom Hearts, I'm like, something's off about him. Like, something does not feel right about him. Ironically, Sephiroth is more iconic for me in Kingdom Hearts than he is in Final Fantasy VII, because I grew up with playing Kingdom Hearts 2, fighting him all day. But
he's a legit challenge in that series. Like,
yeah, that's a whole
Jesus
different
Christ,
thing, really.
It's pretty cool how Sephiroth is like an amazing boss in like 3 different games at this stage. 4. Christ. There's so many good Sephiroths now. This is a problem.
I was intensely disappointed that he wasn't in Kingdom Hearts 3.
Yeah, well.
Weren't there like very few Square Enix characters in Kingdom Hearts?
Only in Remind.
Oh wait, only in Remind?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
I did not know
put it
that.
in the main game.
It was questionable.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to go into that. I can't go into that right now. I'm gonna
Yeah.
basically become
We'll be here all
I'll
day.
go on about Kingdom Hearts 3 for like.
Focus on one square-based disaster at a time.
Exactly. We got one Nomura thing to talk about. We don't need to go into another.
My first main Final Fantasy game, which might explain a lot about me, was Final Fantasy 13. That was my first.
Yeah.
That's
I finished it.
interesting.
Actually, as a kid,
different-
when I first played it as a kid, I think it was like 12. I don't know if that still counts as a kid.
Close enough.
At that age, I never finished it. I got like pretty far, but I didn't finish it. I didn't finish till a lot later. But I think that being my first real Final Fantasy was like the reason I'm apologetic towards it. Maybe.
Hey, I just replayed it and actually kind of really liked it, so I'm right there with you.
I'll never forgive it.
We got like massive like ideas about Final Fantasy 13. I love it.
But my point is, I never finished 7. I still haven't finished 7. I tried to play recently, like a year ago, I think. And I'm trying to play it again now to actually finish it after playing the remake. But I tried playing it a year ago. I got to the gold saucer, and this is half not really even the fault of the game, but half of it kind of was, because part of it was after I got it, because I loved Midgar so much, but after I got out of it, it felt really aimless and weird and strange. And by the time I got to the gold saucer, I was like, I'm not vibing with this at all. Anything that's going on right now, anything after Midgar, anything, like, it just felt weird and strange. And I can't really go into it fully because that would take me forever to explain, but then I got to Barrett's backstory after the gold saucer, and my game on Switch just crashed, and my last save was before the Chocobo races, and I'm like, I'm good.
Yeah,
I don't feel like
yeah.
going
Yep.
back to Barrett.
Yep.
Well, I will say, and this maybe might be like ambling us more towards getting to the remake talk after all that, is I think that is the benefit of the Midgar section, is it has like a strong sense of direction, whereas once you get out into like the open Gaia part, it is nice getting this like wide open space to explore, but it also feels a little bit aimless at times. At least that was my experience with it.
I would say not even just a little. I would say pretty aimless, because once you get out of Midgar, there's really nothing to tell you to go to the small town where the Chocobo place is. I mean, you're allowed to just go straight into the desert area where I forgot what the monster's
Oh yeah,
name
the
is.
big snake.
Yeah, the big snake.
The
yeah.
Midgar Zolom.
Yeah, exactly. So like you get to go there, and then you figure out through trial and error, like, oh man, like this is gonna be a bad time if I try and fight this guy. So then you go to the town, and there is a sort of direction where it's kind of hinting that you should go and try to find a different solution, but it is kind of aimless. And considering there's a lot of random encounters, it can kind of get a little monotonous after a bit without like any speeding feature.
You see, this is really kind of surreal to me, because I remember when I was growing up, the common consensus was that the Midgar section sucked, and the game got good once you left Midgar.
No, I heard that too, which always surprised
It's very
me.
much based on personal taste and maybe when you came into it, I guess.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is like, because the first time you play through it, it is very much like, it can be a little trial and error, but especially once you get past the Midgar Zolom, it like opens up in a way that's actually like fun, and it feels like you have agency rather than you're just being railroaded.
Once you get
Yeah,
past
that
that
is true.
cave, like once you get past that cave, that
And-
like right after the Zolom, I think that's when it starts getting a little bit more direction of where to go.
And it doesn't hurt that this was around the time when like you started to get summon materia as well.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
And that back in like 2000 even was like those looked impressive back then.
You get the fat chocobo when you go to that little town with the chocobos, and you can make them dance, and then they give you the summon.
Yeah, it's great.
I love the dumb stuff like that in FF7, and I appreciate that the remake did not shy from the silliness.
I am so happy they kept some of that silly stuff in there. The Honeybee Inn, once we get to talk about that, is probably my favorite part of that whole game.
Final Fantasy is like one of the silliest series ever created, and the fact that Square spent the better part of a decade trying to pretend that it's not has been like the core problem for a long time.
Tell me about it. This thing has rideable chickens. Come on.
They're rideable chickens that have their own theme song.
Oh my god, that theme song is amazing. I don't care what anybody says.
The version from FF5 is the best version.
I love the the remix that's in 15, like this techno remix. I was like, okay, I'm low-key digging this.
Didn't 13.2 have its own like metal version?
Wait, what? I have
No,
not played
I know
13.2
exactly what you're
yet.
talking about.
Yeah, I do.
What?
What version did FF7R have?
Oh,
Hip Hop de Chocobo or something like that.
was it hip?
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
what
there
it was
was.
called.
There was. I'm pretty sure there was like a Chocobo theme that was like a little bit more leaning, I think, on a hip hop angle.
Hey, Matsu, give me that trap remix of the Chocobo theme. I need it. Little Uzi Vert feature, come on.
No, what we need is an extended version of that fighting track when you're going with Aerith to Wall Market.
Oh, it's
That
so
sounds,
good.
It's so good. It sounds like something straight out of I think Max said it best, where it sounds like straight out of Tekken. It's amazing. Yeah. Remake is definitely a game that I think had so many different expectations for it. Like, there were
absolutely.
so many different ways to approach Final Fantasy VII Remake, from either the perspective of somebody who's never played Final Fantasy VII or just Final Fantasy in general.
Let's start there. What were we all expecting from it?
I was expecting more or less, because I was reading some interviews. I didn't want to read or see too much to not be spoiled, but pretty much what I expected was a 1-to-1 remake to a certain point. I knew, we'll get into the major story stuff later, but like the whispers and stuff like that, I knew that was into it. And I knew that was going to change a few things, but for the most part, I felt they were going to stick to the main path and then have maybe some diverging points at specific moments and then near the end. And I was kind of right, with the last part being especially true. So I guess my expectations were mostly met with this game.
See, I was expecting less of 1-to-1 and more closer to not what it was, but like in the same way that like when I first saw like trailers and stuff like way back, I was like, okay, like they're gonna hit all the important beats, they're gonna hit all the things that we expect. They were very upfront early on that it's like, don't worry guys, we're gonna do the honeybee in cloud dressing up sequence. We will not be removing that. So I was like, okay, they're clearly gonna keep to those details and they're not gonna cut stuff out just for the sake of it. But I was expecting something kind of in the same way as like Resident Evil 2 Remake, where it's like, okay, they're clearly gonna like try some different things and like, but overall keep a similar story structure. But there's gonna be a few divergence.
Yeah, I basically expected something similar to like the Twin Snakes remake. So like better graphics, they're gonna amp it up a bit, they're gonna expand certain things. I don't think any of us expected what they ended up doing towards the end. But even with that in mind, I decided, what? I'm gonna go into this game with an open mind, because regardless of what they do, the original is always going to be there. I can always return to it. I can always play it. So I don't need them to do a 1-to-1 remake. I'm totally okay with them switching things up, adding stuff, removing things. To be fair though, they didn't remove a ton. They removed very little. They mostly just expanded. They fleshed things out. They added and...
They removed one important thing, but that's about it.
Yeah. They certainly extended things.
They
in certain
spammed
areas.
the add button on the calculator to middling effect sometimes.
Yes.
But yeah, for me, I basically was coming into this like I'd effectively just thrown all of my expectations out the window. I was just ready to accept this as whatever it was, because whatever it was wasn't going to be like what I like had pictured in my head. I could tell instantly. And likewise, given how like Square has been in the past decade, like its quality was, until the moment I had it in my hands, its quality was so up in the air for me. It could have been amazing, it could have been a complete train wreck. So I was just doing my best to be like, okay, I'm just going to play it, I'm just going to try and enjoy it in the ways that I can, as much as I can, and accept it as its own thing, and do my best to not get too hung up on its relation to the original, which, as luck would have it, is the exact opposite way Nomura wanted me to play this goddamn game.
Yeah. I mean, I went into it expecting... I honestly did expect a 1-to-1 remake. I don't know fucking why I play Kingdom Hearts. I don't know why I expected it, to be honest. But I did not think they had the balls to do what they did. I'm just going to be honest.
Well,
like, I thought they were going to play it safe. I really did. But...
Well, I will say this, and I've written this down somewhere, is that it's very weird kind of remaking FF7 nowadays, because it's one thing remaking Resident Evil 2 Remake or Resident Evil 3, because I don't think like changing that, most of them it's just changing the perspective, and you know, some of the story stuff is lost a little bit, but generally the same game. Not same game, but you know what I mean. But with FF7, it's like, it's such a drastic leap from where it was contextually when it came out that like it's not even really fair to not compare it, but it's like the expectations were so high for this game in a way that it never could have reached. This game could have been perfection, and it still would have been tough to meet what FF7 is for some people, especially if it was a 1-to-1 remake, because when it originally came out on the PS1, it was, you know, low poly textures, you know, you had your the models were basically like Lego blocks and stuff like that. So the player has to like kind of imagine what happens. It's kind of like a book. You had to kind of like, you know, perceive what's happening and you kind of had to like give the game the benefit of the doubt in a lot of cases. Whereas in, you know, 2020, where it's like hyper realistic graphics and all that stuff, it has to work so much harder to meet that, you know, because now you can do those things. You can't, you know, there isn't going to be that level of like, oh, Cloud hands something to someone, but if you don't see it, then it's like, well, what was he handing to them? You know what I mean?
Well, there was a
go ahead, Dan.
There was a huge level of abstraction in the original game that isn't going to be allowed in the remake due to the nature of it having to fully render all of these environments, which were previously big JPEGs, if we're being honest, like, you know, JPEGs and movie files. So
and also the other factor to that I was trying to like form as I was talking is that when FF7 first came out, like way back in the day, that was like the big mainstream blowout for Final Fantasy and JRPGs. And that was when like Square was going to be like, okay, let's do something really weird with this series we have, and we're going to do something very different. This game kind of had to, for a lot of people, had to just be that, but it was never going to have that same impact coming out, because it's like, oh, video games are super mainstream now, like that's like the biggest thing, so it's not going to have that cultural explosion to it, and it's always and it's not going to meet that like high expectation put upon it in that same way. So that's why I kind of look at Nomura and, you know, the creative dev team, and I'm like, you know what? All criticism I might have aside, I respect them even trying it, because I don't think there's a harder game to be told you're remaking and being able to accomplish it and please everyone.
Especially since this is a game that's so centered around like its storytelling and its presentation and all of that. Even in the original, it was such like, compared to everything else at the time, it was such an unbelievable spectacle to see so much of what it was doing. But obviously, if you just did a 1-to-1 translation of like the PS1 stuff, like, you know, polished up the graphics and then shoved it onto PS4, that it does not hit the same. It is a different time and place. It lands completely differently.
Yeah, like, especially considering, like, the fact with, like, Resident Evil 2 Remake or Resident Evil 3 Remake is that, more or less, when it comes to, you know, those survival horror games, I wouldn't say, like, it's easier to remake it, but basically, tank controls and all that stuff. Like Resident Evil 4, I think somebody made a mod that like takes the camera and puts it in like survival horror ways and shows you that it's pretty much the same game.
Oh, you mean the fixed camera perspectives?
Yeah, thank you. And so when it comes to like survival horror for RE2 remake and RE3 remake, it's pretty easy to take that old school survival horror format and convert it into a third person, exploration type game in the mansion and everything, police station, everything like that. It's much different when taking a game where turn-based combat, as much as I love turn-based combat, that was pretty much the only form. Like, there was some experimentation in JRPGs, but not too much. Turn-based was pretty much the form of combat, and the style in which it presented itself was pretty standard. That is no longer so in vogue, I guess you can call it. Like, there's games like, Persona 5 and Dragon Quest 11 that still show, hey, this is still viable, people still love this, but it's definitely not...
It's not the zeitgeist anymore.
Exactly. It's not the zeitgeist anymore. It's not as
it's still
impactful.
An active, healthy genre, but it's not like the default.
Yeah, it's not on the forefront anymore.
Unless you're Persona, it's much harder to sell turn-based gameplay to people outside of fans of that.
Yeah, that's why when they announced that it was going to be sort of like this mix of tactical, even way back when CyberConnect was working on the project, like it was this mix of turn-based like tactical decisions and real-time combat. I was intrigued by that idea because I was like, okay, that makes sense. As long as you keep some form of tactics in how you use spells and abilities, I think that's fine. And lo and behold, I was kind of right.
Yeah, no, like, we'll probably get into this more later, but I really like how they were able to translate the combat system in here overall. Like, I definitely have my gripes with it, but, like,
yeah,
carrying the way the original combat flowed into a, like, new era, effectively, I think it does about as good of a job as can reasonably be expected.
Like, to put into context, you guys know that after beating Remake, I went back to 13 and 15, and to see the evolution of basically each game's combat system and see that they clearly wanted to go into this sort of real-time combat system but were too afraid and kind of limiting themselves in a lot of areas, I can pretty much definitively say that Remake is the best version of that they could have come up with.
It's not even fair.
There was a lot of half steps leading to this.
Sorry, what was that?
There was a lot of half steps leading up to this.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Like it has the stagger bar, which was introduced in 13. It has the switching of characters, which was introduced in
15.
I think 12 and 15 and stuff like that. And there's a lot of elements from both of those games that they said, okay, we really messed up, according to fans, and the people love 13 and people love 15, but general consensus is that the combat systems weren't the best. And they basically looked at those two games and was like, okay, we had some really good ideas in here. What can we do to make it better? And I think they actually, some issues here and there, they pretty much nailed it out of the park.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, if we're going into like our general thoughts on like execution now, I think the combat, outside of like minor gripes I have, I think they hit the perfect balance with 7's combat, because like a lot of people when I saw trailers and it looked like kind of like 15's combat, I was a little I don't know about this, guys. But I think they did find a perfect balance of that Kingdom Hearts-esque real-time combat while mixing in what FF7's turn-based is, integrating like ATB system into it. When you prime an attack, an ability, you can pause it so you can actually strategize where you're aiming and what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's this perfect blend of like real-time action with like hints of strategy that really, when it comes together perfectly, it's so fun.
Yeah, like what was it? Because like you guys know this, but I finished a run through of FF7R on hard mode, and like what was it? after having spent that kind of time with it, I've come to really appreciate just how well this style of gameplay sets itself up to be far more strategic than it is reactionary. You know, this is, the way I've been describing it, is this is a traditional turn-based game wearing an action game skin.
Yeah.
That was something I really had to come to grips with, though, because at first...
it's super unintuitive on first
I was trying
blush.
to play this game like I play Kingdom Hearts, and it was not working at
Nope.
all.
No.
And I
Nope,
didn't
no.
understand at first why it wasn't working. And I just had this switch in my brain, like 10 hours in. I'm like, wait, this isn't like... this isn't really like an action game, is it? And then all of a sudden, it kind of just clicked in my head, and I was like, wow, this is really great, but I had to train my mind to not play it a certain way before I came to that conclusion. Because when you're trying to play it like an action game, it's like, you have to realize you're supposed to take damage sometimes, you know what I mean? Like, and the dodge doesn't really have...
Exactly.
The dodge doesn't really have iframes, I don't
No,
know.
it really
doesn't.
doesn't.
It doesn't, but it's good for positioning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But when I was first playing it, I was like, well, I'm going to use this like I play fucking Metal Gear Rising or Kingdom Hearts. Like, if I dodge, it won't hit me. But that was
doesn't
very
work.
hard to figure that
Nope,
out. At
not
first.
how it works.
I don't know
Nope.
if the parry materia has iframes when you use it.
It does.
It does. Okay.
It does, and it deals damage. That said, everyone's parry is kind of slow, except for Tifa's, which is broken. If you take anything away from this, if you haven't played the game yet, the number one thing I want you to take away, equip the parry materia on Tifa. It makes her 50 times better when you're actually controlling her.
Interesting. Okay.
It's
Okay,
so
I'll definitely
fast.
have to do that, because I love switching over to Tifa to pretty much get that stagger bar as close as you can near the top. Just see it raise, like, by a huge margin,
That was
and then get
something
Cloud... Oh my god.
Really,
It gives
like-
her the best getaway option I found.
It really impressed me. This is kind of the same. Well, when I play like any action game, like if I'm playing Metal Gear Rising or playing Kingdom Hearts, I'm like, you are mostly stuck with the one character until a level switch happens, and then you become somebody else sometimes. In this, I'm like, wow, you can just real-time switch to somebody who plays completely differently, which is kind of crazy to me, because like, obviously you're able to do that in turn-based games for the longest time, but this is like pseudo-action, so I'm like, whoa,
Yeah.
this is like, they
Oh,
play
and-
completely
Yeah, no, because
differently.
they did not phone in the difference in styles at all. Every
No.
character feels very, very distinctive.
Yeah, like Barrett, for example. Like, in the original game, don't get me wrong, like, I use Barrett every now and then, but he wasn't really a character that I, like, went to for any fights. And then in this game, I was like, at first, it was a little weird, because, because you have Cloud, and he has a sword and everything, you have Tifa, punches and everything, and Barrett's there in the back just shooting his guns. It was a little weird, but once you really click with Barrett, especially once you have that section where it's just him, you really figure out how to like manage him properly, and it's amazing.
That section when you're playing exclusively as him, that was the first time where I was like, oh, he's actually really good.
Yeah, it was
that's
fantastic.
And that's also around the time where you get a Big Bertha along with Maxim
Yes!
Fury,
I was
which
gonna
is
say-
far and away his
That
best
is
move.
so
It's
OP.
not even
is,
fair.
is probably the command I use the most for him.
Same.
Oh, it's so
it's his best
overpowered.
move. It's not even
so
fair.
good.
It's fantastic. Like, all you have to do is charge that up to 2 bars, and it's pretty much a non-stop stream of bullets. It is amazing.
I also appreciated how they balanced his character, because his dodge is kind of not good, but if you think about it, that would make sense. Not just because of his build, he's a big burly guy, but mechanically speaking, his dodge would be worse than everyone else's because he has the benefit of long range. So that's the handicap for him, because he has such a huge advantage of the fact that he could stay so far away from enemies and deal damage.
Honestly,
never even thought of
I
that.
just put the ATB builder for when you block on him, because I was like, well, if I'm using him, I'm not even gonna bother. I'm just gonna tank it.
Yeah, see, that makes sense.
This has like nothing
Yeah.
to do with the actual combat, but Aerith's dodge animation makes me want to dodge all the fucking time because it's amazing.
I
so
know,
good.
it's so good.
She does a little spin jump.
Yeah, I don't know why, but in combat sometimes I just spin around as Aerith because it's fun.
Yeah, it's cute.
Yeah, I
on a
just wish her attack had, like, I don't know, something. It just feels way slower to attack with Aerith. As much as I love her dodge, her attacking is like I never went to her to attack. Really.
Oh yeah,
You
she's a mage.
You see, she quickly became one of my, like, basically my second in line right after Cloud in most circumstances, because while her attack isn't especially good, her ATB abilities are all so fucking shattered
Oh
that it's
yeah.
absolutely unfair. Arcane
What's that
Ward
ability?
alone.
Is that the one that gives you like two?
That lets you
spells.
double
Attacks?
cast.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And then she also gets ATB Ward later on.
Oh,
man,
yeah,
that's-
yeah.
And she just straight up gets a wall at one point. Like, you can just conjure a wall to block projectiles.
If she doesn't get a chair as an ability to use against
I feel
somebody
like
in the
I've
sequel,
missed
I
so
will get
much.
very mad.
There are things you're talking about right now that I don't think I even got for Aerith, or I just never used.
A lot of them, what was it? The wall one, for instance, is very easy to miss. You have to steal that from the ghost chariot thing in chapter 11.
I didn't
Yeah, I
steal
never did
anything
that.
because
Oh, yeah.
I
Yep.
remember reading the chariot boss and being like, you can steal something from him, and I'm like, cool, I don't even have steal. Like,
Yeah,
it's
no,
not even
it's-
just I don't
it's
have it
pretty
equipped,
annoying.
I just don't have it at all. So
What did you guys think of the whole like weapon ability thing, where you have to use a specific weapon to be able to unlock that ability indefinitely?
I
for
like
the
that in
playthrough?
every game that has it. I actually always like that feature where it's like once you learn this, then it's yours.
Yeah, like Final Fantasy IX and Tales of Vesperia, like that type of system, I always dug it. Like, because it always makes you
Yeah.
look forward to the next piece of equipment that you get, because more than just like whatever benefits that piece of equipment has, you're also looking forward to the skill that's attached to it.
Yeah, that's
And
why I love Lost Odyssey. Lost Odyssey has a similar skill, still way of doing things, where you have to make the immortal characters tie their abilities to mortal characters in order to learn abilities.
And
So
I do
I'm right there
give it
with
a
you.
lot of credit in that every weapon, as soon as it's like, oh well, I don't need this anymore, toss in garbage. It's like, no, there's actually valid reasons to go to older weapons you already have proficiency in.
Every
because
weapon
it
has a use.
Yes.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
It's like maybe it has more inherent materia slots. Maybe this one has like super high damage. Maybe this one has just
Well,
higher
something I ran
magic,
into a lot
so-
is that some weapons have link materia slots and some don't.
Yes.
Yeah, it really wants
that
you
became
to
a
like
big factor is that I need to link like magnify or something, and I need
Yeah.
those link slots, and if they don't have
Yeah,
it,
where
then
that's where
I
the
might
upgrade
switch.
system comes in, and I'm so glad they added that system in. Like, I think the upgrade system was great.
I didn't like it at first till I realized that it meant that every weapon on long enough timeline was still going to be useful.
Exactly.
And sure enough, like by the time I got to the end of hard mode, first off, everything gets 6 materia slots, so it just comes down to what you prefer in terms of actual use. But like that is the reason why I finished off hard mode with the goddamn Buster Sword of all things.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
To this exact moment, I think that's probably the best weapon in the game for most situations.
Though
It's
honestly,
pretty
it's
balanced.
not that sophisticated though, because you can honestly just set all of the weapons to just auto set for max damage and just leave it at that.
See, yeah, I did that with my weapons. Is I had it auto do their upgrades, because
Yeah.
sometimes at first I was going through all like the Crystarium, basically what it is, but I was going through it and I'm like, I really don't care. Like, I don't really care about these individual things. I'm just kind of gonna let it go. Like, when I saw that you could auto upgrade based on like attack, balance, or defense or whatever it was, and I was like, this seems like cuts out the middleman for me, because I'm not a crazy big min-maxer, so I don't really care where it goes as long as it's upgrading.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's the same
yeah,
here.
See, I'm the opposite.
Well-
I love getting into the nitty gritty and seeing all the stats that I can increase, or, I like having that control. So I actually really appreciated that the weapon system worked the way it did. And especially, like Ryan said before, that it kept the Buster Sword as a viable weapon. I mean, it's such an iconic weapon, and I always thought it was... I mean, it makes sense in the original game that eventually you would get better swords, but it always did seem like a little weird that it's on the front cover, it's in all the promotional art that he has this cool sword, but then it gets quickly replaced in the original game. So I do actually really like that the Buster Sword can remain in rotation and be a viable weapon throughout the entirety of the remake.
I'm right there with you, man.
Me and King, I think, both agree with that. It's just more like the minutia of like, oh, I have just enough points to get like a upgrade now. I'll go. It's like I'm not gonna like stop what I'm doing to go get like 1 plus 10 fire damage. You know what I mean?
That's the thing that gets me, is that as soon as a system is like, you get plus 3% magic, I'm like, instantly do not care, because these upgrades are not substantial enough for me to like.
Yeah, until I knew there was
I
knew there was a thing that set it for you, I would just wait until it was like 40 points, and I would be like, oh, I get like 4 upgrades now, and it actually feels like a substantial gain.
Yeah, and that's why I didn't like the system initially, is because it just felt like another one of those generic, boring upgrade systems, which are like one of my biggest pet peeves. But once you start like holding on to like 100 or 200 skill points, and you're able to like actually build something and like create the weapon into something that's like specifically useful for what you need at that moment, that's when it starts to become more interesting to me.
Yeah, like I was afraid, like KingK said, basically about the Crystarium, where it's like, oh hey, it's another Crystarium thing. But the difference between the Crystarium and this is that the Crystarium, despite having a few branching pathways, it pretty much forces you to get certain things like HP plus 50 or something like that as you're going through the leveling. So you might as well have just made that system automatic. Like, there are some branches in the Crystarium where, in order to get Fyra or Blizzara, you have to go off the beaten path. So it's like, why not just give me that ability on the main path?
Yeah, the difference between like a good skill tree system and a bad one is the level of agency that is given to the player has to matter in regards to like, how they craft their characters. Like, it needs to feel like the decisions that you're making are meaningful. And in the case of the Crystarium, especially for like a large portion of that game, you're just kind of railroaded into just getting HP plus 20 or whatever, and it doesn't really feel that rewarding, because you don't
it doesn't open up until like 2 forests away.
I would kind of push back on that a little, because like I don't think it necessarily needs to result in something being like inherently expressive per se, especially in something like FF7, where you're eventually going to hit level cap. You're eventually going to be able to buy everything. This isn't WoW or Diablo, For me, the big difference is that the things I'm buying need to be something I'm excited to buy. So, like, I don't think anyone's ever been like, oh yeah, plus 4 magic defense, that's what I want, that's what I've been waiting for. But stuff like one of the endgame abilities that some weapons have are like a reprieve, which means if you get killed, you immediately res with 1 HP. That's super helpful. That I grabbed instantly and was very happy to have it.
I mean, I got excited anytime it said new materia slot.
Yeah,
that too. Yeah. There you go. That's probably the best example.
Yeah. Because it basically turns some weapons from having basically little to no usage in the later game to pretty much being, oh hey, I can actually use this if I want to. And like we were talking about, where every weapon is viable, it just depends on what you want to bring into the battle. Like, do you want to just go in like complete strength wise and just get the baseball bat or the nail bat, or what's the one with the Japanese symbols on it?
Hard Edge.
Hard Edge, yes, thank you. And it's like, you use those two if you want to go full strength. If you want a more balanced approach, and the Buster Sword is your best bet, because that thing is just balanced to perfection.
See, I expected, like, this is the rhythm I get into for, like, any turn-based, or just any RPG really ever that has gear, where you get to a new town and you're like, okay, where's the shop so I can immediately replace all of my gear and weapons? And that didn't really happen in this. Instead, I'm like, where's the shop so I can find a new weapon to get its ability? And that was like a new kind of rush for me, because I like, before it was kind of like, okay, this is kind of a formality. I have all the money I need to just replace all this shit that I have to get my stats up. And in this one, it's like, I am excited to see what new weapon I'm getting and what new cool ability it has. Like, when I got the nail bat, and you could do moves that was like you're swinging a baseball bat. I'm like, that's like, I'm gonna use this for a while. But then when I got sick of that animation, I'm like, okay, now I have the hard edge or whatever, and I'm like, well, I have the ability, so I'm gonna switch off and do whatever. Like, it's just like, I like that a lot better than. Like, I mean, obviously there's an appeal to like upgrading your weapons and equipment that I wouldn't say is like bad. I just like, what I expected was that, and what I got was not that, and it was exciting to me.
I always like in the game where the certain placement of the weapons, like you get the nail bat in the Section 5 slums, which when you really think about it makes sense. Yeah. Like, they don't have a lot of money to, like, spend on getting really good weapons, so here's a giant bat with nails in it, and that works just as well. And then you go and get Hard Edge right next to the Coliseum. Why wouldn't you get this really strong weapon to go into a fighting pit? Like, it makes sense. You know what, though?
I do question why, like, this isn't even really a point. Like, this is not a point of criticism, but I question why Barrett would want to put a wrecking ball on his arm.
Yeah. I didn't use any of those melee weapons.
That was in the original.
Yeah, I remember that.
But it just doesn't work here. Like, I never used any of those melee weapons.
Like, put this thing on my arm so I can, like, uppercut people.
Let me smash the ground.
For what it's worth, those abilities, especially if you combo them, can do a great deal of damage and stagger, but at the same time, why the hell would you ever
know what I
get
actually
close with
ran
it?
into? This has nothing. This kind of a miscellaneous point. When I first started hard mode, I still had a melee weapon equipped to Barrett.
Oh,
and they force you to do a ranged combat section that for turrets that Cloud is not allowed to jump up to. So that was an agonizing hard mode fight in a mode where you're not supposed to use your MP.
Okay, and you can't switch gear in mid.
And I thought certainly they would have thought of this and would allow Cloud to jump, but of course they want you to use Barrett in the normal game. But I didn't have I don't know if they ever thought about the idea that you could have a weapon equipped to Barrett that is not his ranged attack.
But I don't think they had the idea of like still keeping letting you get items in hard mode when you're not even allowed to use items. So no, there's some things they didn't think about.
Yeah, there's more than a couple things about hard mode that I would argue are not completely baked, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
The dough hasn't risen.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's not fully cooked.
Yeah,
it's just,
exactly.
It's still a little raw.
Exactly.
I think that actually segues us into, because we've been like praising the combat pretty well, but I think there is some like grievances, at least like I know like some of us have. I think one of the biggest problems in this game, and I think King was actually fair in kind of going into this game kind of expecting something leaning towards Kingdom Hearts, because there is some things that reinforce that feeling. And one of it is like, there is some level of aerial combat, but it's not well designed for it, in that every enemy that's in the air I fucking hate. I hate every enemy that stays
Anytime any character wants to jump in the air, I'm like, whoa, calm down. Like, you're about to get stuck in like a 3-hit combo that you can't escape from for 5 seconds.
Well, it doesn't help that like some of the first instances and where you can use aerial combat is when you're fighting the drakes in the warehouse, and it's an enclosed area where you're trying to fight flying enemies, and it's like, why would you do this?
I think the worst of it is when you're fighting those helicopter dudes with the propeller hands.
They're terrible.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
And then they'll fly out of the arena.
Yeah, when Cloud is fucking alone on the tower and he has to fight those helicopter people, I'm like, why are you making me do this?
I almost died multiple times. It
genuinely feels like the devs are fucking with me during that scene.
Like, it genuinely frustrated me to the point where I got so frustrated with them that I was starting to do worse in the combat.
See, aerial combat didn't bother me until then, because I was always like, I always had like Aerith or Barrett until they did not let me have those two. So when I didn't have those two, I was like, well, I guess time for Cloud to jump in the air, because I'm not just going to sit around and wait for my ATB to charge.
Or, I mean, you could also equip Arrow, or however you pronounce it, and it's like, you could do that, but
I mean,
I can
need
speak
ATB
from
charge.
first-hand experience that you can do that, and that is what you're supposed to do, but it's still not fun to wait around for that ATB to charge.
So
Oh, God,
I think
no.
that brings me to one of my personal issues with the game is you're not able to customize your materia mid-battle. You can only do it before or after. And this can result in a lot of problems. Like if you have like an elemental element equipped to your sword, for example, like a fire element, and you're fighting against an enemy that absorbs fire or something, you can't just like, oh, let me just go in the menu and fix it. No, you're stuck with it unless you decide to you could press start and you can go to the before the last battle, and then you could switch it if you want, but you shouldn't have to do that.
yeah, like, at a certain point, I started trying to guess the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no,
I
you can
always
restart-
just fucking
you can-
died.
No, you can just restart the battle.
So I'm
It's
like,
great.
well, I want to go reslot my material.
Yeah, no, there were tons of fights where, like, I walked in and I was like, this is not the right gear I need, and I would just restart the fight and, like, spend 5 minutes figuring out
I thought
what
I had
needed.
to die to restart.
Especially Elgor, oh my god.
I had the worst of that, like trial and error combat, and to a certain degree, like trial and error and figuring out like the best like builds can be fun in its own way. But the worst I had it when it was just flat out just this is just aggravating is with Aerith's combat challenge in Hojo's lab, where it's like her alone.
You see, I didn't have
fighting.
any issue with that one.
I had issues because I just kind of went into it just like, okay, let's see what this is and let's test this out. And it was like, okay, this is going to be tedious, but okay, get through it. Then I got to the Ghost. And the Ghost puts on Dispel. So none of Aerith's attacks do any damage, like at all. She has no options in that fight. So I was like, okay, I gotta restart and get Breach, because that's the only option for her, as far as I could see, is you have to basically turn off the Ghost's ability to deflect magic. And then I tried again, and the Ghost basically took off half my health, because Aerith has not a lot of defense.
What was it? Like, admittedly, I did this at cap, so it made it way easier.
Yeah.
But that said, Sorceress versus Storm isn't technically magic. It's an ability. And
I
that
feel like
goes
I feel
right
like I
through
tried it and it didn't work. I could be wrong. But...
Well, the thing is, I discovered this the hard way because the situation I had is, I can't remember the fight on normal, but on hard, Elgor, the skeletal chariot in the graveyard, in the train graveyard, that thing on hard halfway through casts Reflect on itself.
Oh.
No, I take that back. That's a lie. It casts Reflect on you. Which doesn't sound that bad until you try and heal yourself.
Oh, yeah.
And here's another thing. I don't think many people know this because the game doesn't really call for it any other time. But did you know you can't cast Breach or Dispel on yourself?
Wait, really?
I found that out the hard way.
Interesting.
But I
Oh
also
my
found out the
God.
hard way that
Wait,
the game...
You can't do Dispel on yourself?
Nope.
That seems like a design
Deeply
flaw.
questionable, yes.
Yeah, that's funny because I was playing Final Fantasy VIII the other day and I did that all damn day.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's one... To be fair, that was, like, the only time I ever found where you'd want to cast a spell on yourself, but at the same time, like, why?
They should have put that into the equation, basically.
I'll also tell you the real reason why. It's because that's the one fight where it happens, and what they want you to do is unequip all of your healing materia and use prayer and chakra materia. So, like, there are ways to get through, like, stuff like that, stuff like Reflect. Even with someone like Aerith in that specific situation, like, I'm really confident that, like, Sorcerer's Storm would have to go through that because it counts as an ability. It only reflects specifically magic.
Yeah.
That said, it is definitely obnoxious as hell sometimes.
Oh,
yeah. I think the only boss that truly aggravated me was the one that goes down the elevator with Red 13, Barrett, and Aerith.
Oh yeah, the
Oh,
giant
yeah.
tank.
Such a
That
health
guy,
sponge.
I legitimately beat that boss as it was charging its final attack with almost no heal, like no MP left, no potions, no nothing. It
you
just
know
went
what? It
full
doesn't-
blazing and just beat it by accident.
You know what it doesn't communicate well is that you're supposed to keep the characters one behind and one in front. Like, I remember I got halfway through the fight before I realized there's a weak point he can expose on his backside. Like,
Wait,
Yeah,
there
there
is?
is.
yeah. Because what they want you to do, which I don't know how, like, I don't know if there's like something I missed or if they just expect you to like intuit that Barrett is supposed to be on one side and Aerith is supposed to be 180 like opposite to him behind the boss.
Well, like,
I intuited that just because it's like, oh, it can only fire in one direction, so just split up the team rather than keep them close
Yeah,
by.
exactly. Because like there's multiple pillars in that room that you can use as cover. So I just kind of naturally split them up because if it's targeting one of them, that means it's not targeting the other, and that means the other can still be attacking while this one's hiding.
When I played that fight, the characters were already split up as it was, so I just naturally intuited based on that, like, oh, this is how it's supposed to work.
For
You're supposed to go back
reason,
and forth.
Barrett or Aerith would stick very close to me, and I never got far enough behind that I could even see that there was a weak point back there. And that's what confused me, so I'm like, well, I guess I'll just, like, keep hitting the things giving it shields.
Like, what confused me was that since it's, machinery, I was like, oh, just like the game's taught me for the last, 30 hours, just use, lightning material on it. But no, you have to use Blizzara or Blizzard or any sort of ice one on it in order for its main weakness. And I was like, that seems a little
Suspect.
different. I was confused as to why Blizzard was the one. I was like, unless there's something in the original game that I'm not remembering. But
I mean, once I figured out what to do, it just was longer than it needed to be.
yeah, it was
It
real
has
long.
way too much health, honestly.
It does.
Way too much.
And
Like
also,
on all
I don't
difficulties,
know-
it has too much
Did
health.
anybody ever take out the wheels? I don't know, like...
No, I even now I don't know what the
don't
hell
know
the wheel
why
you're
they
supposed to
let
do with the
you
wheel.
target wheels.
I took out one of the wheels, and it makes it so that it stops charging around.
Wait,
Oh,
mean,
that
that-
might be it. Because
I
I
remember
think I did take one out
unloading
using like
into
catastrophe.
wheels.
But I don't. But yeah, that.
Speaking
I
of
remember
that
unloading
boss,
into the wheels, and then, like, it did less damage than I was doing to the boss itself, and that's when I just said, nah, I'm good.
Speaking of that boss, though, that also points another problem I had with the combat, and this is kind of the trade-off of like action versus like the JRPG cinematic attacks thing, is the amount of times I whiffed an attack solely because, oh, we're going into a second phase, we need to play you this cutscene.
Yeah.
Yes.
Especially,
oh my god.
Yeah.
Especially when that attack is a crucial heal. That happened to me
Yeah, like
so
that's what I
many
mean.
times.
When it's like, or it's something you like saved up for, like, oh, this is gonna be a
Like a
big
limit.
fucking Figra or something like that, or Fraga, and it's like, oh, you just whiffed that entirely. You lost that entirely solely just
You know
because
what?
it's going into a second phase.
Or, and I hate this, when it's staggered, and then the stagger resets.
yeah.
yeah.
Oh my god.
To this exact moment, I am still shocked that like you can hit like every Shinra rent-a-cop you encounter with Cloud's like 500-pound sword, and they don't give a shit. They don't care at all. But if a soft winter breeze passes by Barrett a bit too hard while he's casting Cure, that's gone. You're not getting it back.
Yeah.
What aggravated me about that specifically is that I'm pretty sure when you're casting like a really big magic, doesn't it take your MP before it even goes off?
yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
And it can be interrupted, which is
Yep.
like
Yeah, because it takes a
not-
lot
like-
longer
Like
to
it'd be
cast
one thing
it.
if you could still take damage, but like, because like I understand that like it's supposed to be long because it's powerful, and it like I get that. If you're
Yeah.
still supposed to take damage, then it could punish you for doing that at the wrong time. But the fact that it can be interrupted, but it still takes your MP is like a slap. in
It
the
takes
butt.
your
punishing.
MP
And what
your
it
ATB.
honestly and what it honestly means once you like really start to dive into it is that the high level spells, like even like Fyra, not even Firaga, but even Fyra, are just not worth it. They're not worth the risk, they're not worth the cost. Like, you will be able to get out the base level spells way faster, for way cheaper, way more reliably than any of that shit.
I would say that even in the normal playthrough, that's still the case, because, like, regular fire just, or, like, whatever elemental materia, just, if the person's weak to it, will just increase their stagger by a lot anyway. So just increasing the attack strength doesn't really do all too much in comparison.
Yeah, after a while on normal, after being interrupted on my Goth spells so much, I was just like, no, I'm good.
And this is where you have that like seam between like action versus like strategy RPG elements, and this is, you know, just where like there's like that little bit of conflict, because I understand the idea of like you can't constantly interrupt the enemy because then they never get out an attack, so you know you gotta let them have their chance. But it is also frustrating that like, oh, you make one mistake like where you're placed, and it's like, oh, you just get fucked for that one mistake, and it's like, okay, but like why can I not activate those spells? Why do I have to go fucking the other edge of the other side of the battlefield to do spell casting? Because it feels very like counterintuitive, like, oh, I want to cast like a thunder on this machine, better go to the other side, like better go walking.
Well, like, having been playing 13, like, I noticed that they had a similar, similar aspect to it in terms of if you get hit, then you lose the ability that you're casting. But the difference is that in 13, the ATB fills up so fast in comparison that you can still get at least 1 to 2, spells or attacks that you're trying to get in. And when you're switching paradigms, like KingK suggested, you do get damage, but you don't stagger, or it doesn't like stop you from switching. So you do get a sort of a risk-reward thing, like, okay, I'm going to switch now, and I'm still going to get damage if I'm in the middle of an enemy's attack while doing it. But in comparison to Final Fantasy VII Remake, where it's just like, oh, hey, I'm about to charge this attack, and oh, it's gone.
Yeah, that was probably the most frustrating thing about this combat for me.
And then,
getting interrupted.
And there's another minor gripe, and again, I think this is just like a thing they could refine in the next one, but it is like something I've seen a fair few people kind of comment on, and I think it is a fair issue, is that any character you're not currently controlling or giving like commands to, they nearly might as well be standing still in a lot of cases.
Yeah, they're kind of morons sometimes.
That happened to me in hard mode with the Scorpion.
Dude.
I don't know if it's just the Scorpion or the AI, but because it does 2 laser attacks on hard mode instead of just 1.
With no wind-up.
And it doesn't, like, at first, the first time it ever did it, I was like, okay. I had Barret under one pile of debris and Cloud under the other. And once one of the rebels went away, I went to the other character, and it seemed to attack both of them equally. But later in the fight, he attacked the same character twice. For, like, no reason. I don't know why he did it that way.
Were you controlling the character?
I don't think I was, like...
Because in my experience, the game really targets whoever you're controlling, to the point where, like, in the final Sephiroth fight, he will only attack who you're controlling. It's actually kind of easy to abuse.
Yeah, that's what I did. Like, if I noticed that he was starting to go after Cloud or somebody that I thought was weak in health, I was like, no, I'm switching over to somebody else so that he can target him. And I was like, okay, now I
think maybe the thing that got me there then is that when he started charging his laser attacks, I was controlling Cloud. And then when he destroyed the debris, I switched to Barret, but I guess it didn't seem to matter because he had already started charging again for Cloud.
That's entirely possible.
But at that point, I was like, well, who... At that point, I'm like, I don't know who I'm supposed to be controlling if either of them are equally at risk.
Yeah, like, my experience was, I'm like, oh, okay, this is just going to do the one laser attack. And then I moved out of cover, and then Cloud just immediately got it, incinerated by that laser. And I was like, what the hell just happened? So then I had Barret, and Barret can't defeat him on his own, so I was like,
I guess it's a testament, though, to, like, the normal playthrough I had that it wasn't really until hard mode where I noticed it was that much of a problem. It was a little, it was a little weird at first, but I can't remember a specific normal mode boss fight that it really aggravated me that my AI wasn't doing things correctly or something because I had so much control over all the characters.
The thing is, like, in my experience, the biggest problem with hard mode by a wide margin is even now, I don't know when the game really wants you to do it, because it's not tuned for, like, level 35 to 40, which is probably, in my experience, what most people kind of end up being after one normal playthrough.
Yeah.
And, like, but it's not tuned for that at all. You are going to get owned. There's no way. There's just no way. I'm convinced. I did like 5 fights on that scorpion thing, and I got some of them as clean as I think it could be, but my numbers just weren't big enough. It was that simple. And sure enough, I do another playthrough to grind up some stuff, and so I can, see the story again. Get to cap, come back, free. It's completely free. It's so easy. And everything was, like, almost every fight was arguably easier than it was on normal, because even on at least on normal, like, you didn't have all of the tools you needed, and you didn't have counter stance, which is so busted it hurts.
Plus, you didn't have, like, the knowledge of the system itself to completion by that point. Once you're into a new playthrough, you're like, okay, I know what abilities work well. Like, if I have a group of people, triple slash all the way. There is no way I'm not using triple slash if there's even more than just 2 people there.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like...
That thing is so great.
I feel like while it was admirable of them to try and combine the merits of both, the turn-based combat with action-based combat, I feel like trying to find that compromise has ended up creating a combat system that's honestly, while fun, it just feels really messy. Like, I feel like had they focused more on the action side of things, then they could have tightened the mechanics and they could have made something that was more skill-based. Because a lot of times, it does feel like you're just kind of screwed and it's out of your control, and that just sucks, Like, sometimes...
Well, that's also kind of intrinsic to the nature of JRPGs as a genre. Sometimes you're just going to get, like, dunked on.
Sure, but, like, I don't know. Maybe it's just because I'm used to... When I'm playing an action game, I'm thinking of something like Devil May Cry, and I know I'm not supposed to play this game like I'm playing Devil May Cry. That's not really fair. But I also can't help the fact that some of the deficiencies in the mechanics make me think back to Devil May Cry and go like, fuck, this wouldn't be a problem in that game.
Well, and you see, this is why I call it a JRPG wearing an action game skin, because like I totally get that impulse, because I had that exact same impulse for a long time, but it's also kind of like denying what the game wants to be in a way, because that's
very
clearly
much,
what it wants to do.
It very clearly wants to be a JRPG, but it wants to give you a little bit more freedom in the way an action game does. But yeah, because when it comes down to it, the more important thing is less what you're doing in terms of like the action side. It more depends on your numbers, like a JRPG.
Yes.
Yeah, like how I saw it was that in a typical turn-based game, you're gonna get hit no matter what. You're gonna take damage at some point in that fight. There is almost no way for you to go out unscathed unless you were like completely overpowered. And so, if I was like designing the combat system, I guess it makes sense for that character constantly getting damaged along the fight, because that's what happened in the original game. That's what happened when you were fighting and you got damaged and all that stuff. So it makes sense that you wouldn't have a lot of ways to keep the damage going down. So it becomes a way of managing your MP and your items, just like in the original game. I think I kind of agree with Dan though, where it's like it's still a little messy, and they could definitely.
Because I played other like Tales of Grace's F, for example. I think has one of the best action RPG combat systems ever. If you're skilled enough, you can play that game and not get hit. Like, and I don't see why Final Fantasy... I understand Final Fantasy VII Remake wanted to do its own thing, and I respect that. But I don't know if that's really an excuse for the mechanics to still not be tight enough for you to be able to play the game skillfully.
I mean... To me, that's kind of akin to asking why is it impossible to do no-hit runs in like Final Fantasy XIV? Because that's another game where there's a lot of skill in there, and there's a lot of positioning. There's a lot of knowing what to do next, knowing enemy patterns and all of that. But like, even if you dodge every AoE, every orange circle that gets dropped down in that game, you're still going to get hit a lot.
Okay.
And you can do a lot to mitigate that, but that's also part of the challenge, is upkeeping your team through the like cadence of the fight.
Yeah, that's how I saw it. I saw that the game wasn't necessarily about dodging and making sure that you didn't get hit, but more of, okay, you're gonna get hit, how do you circumvent?
Yeah, I get that.
What do you use in order to get
I
that
did understand that.
That's
but
how I thought.
I guess I just don't like it. It's a personal thing.
And
that's
fair.
That's fine.
totally
Yeah,
fair.
that's fair. Like, there was something about the combat system that just really clicked, but also felt off, and I think it had to do with certain abilities where I had the same idea as you did, Dan, where I would kind of revert into that Devil May Cry, mentality, where I'd be like, oh, directional inputs and stuff like that. But there really isn't that many directional inputs in the game, so it's like, it just kind of
it
with
felt
my
like
mind
there was
a
a
bit.
gear missing almost. Like, it felt like there should have been like an extra mechanic or something. Just like
A jump button.
Yes,
maybe
yes.
a jump button.
A jump button and a launcher. That's really, I think,
And,
one of the biggest things this game was missing.
And an aerial recovery.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
I wanna
Double
be
jump,
able
there you
to
go.
launch with Aerith and then just do helm splitters. Why
Yeah.
can
No,
I
I
not
want
do
to jump
that?
in the air with Aerith and do that ray beam attack. A ray of, like, just that would be so
Ray of
sweet.
Judgment.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Do in the air.
Yeah.
But like, I had an idea and I totally lost
The
it.
thing is, though, like
we've spent quite a bit of time on combat. Should we maybe move on to other stuff?
sure.
Well, do you want to go on the hard mode spiel now, or?
But I think we kind of were.
Yeah,
going
I
on
feel
the
like that was
spiel.
basically it.
I think there's only one thing I want to say about the combat system, and that is that I see a lot of people, and this is something that I see a lot of times happen in gaming discussions, where, say, a game comes out and it has some elements that maybe aren't so great about it, that people kind of immediately dismiss it and don't think about how they can improve on the sequel, considering that there are so many games out there where the sequel just vastly improves over the first in many instances. Like Kingdom Hearts to Kingdom Hearts 2, Assassin's Creed to Assassin's Creed 2, Uncharted to Uncharted 2. And this is one of those instances where, yeah, we love the combat, but there's clearly some things that are wrong with it. And I think that all they need is just that one extra game, when they're getting that sequel out. I think that's the one, because now they have all the assets done. They generally know where they're going with the story as far as we're aware. So now they can focus on making sure that the combat, now that it's done, has more depth. So this, like, the first one's the first outing. Here's what we have. Give us your feedback. And then the second, it's like, okay, let's polish this to.
So here's my suggestion before we move on. I get that maybe they don't want you to switch materias on the fly during combat. So if they don't want to do that, my suggestion would be to allow you to have different loadouts that you can switch to during combat. So
Yes, that'd be
that
really
would
good.
actually be a good idea. Yeah, that would be
that
great.
way we can get rid of this issue of, like, you have a fire element on your sword and the enemy absorbs fire and you're just kind of screwed unless you reload. Like, that's just not fun. Just
And that would also help
Especially
because
since, like, up and D... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say with the weapons, it would have really been nice, even without being able to switch between them mid-combat, just to have a loadout set that you could just go in and go, oh, I know I'm gonna be fighting something electric. I'm gonna use this, this loadout set.
Yeah, because I ended
what
up having to kind of guess what was around the area. Like, okay, I noticed that the majority of the enemies in this area are organic, so I'm just going to use fire because most of them are weak to fire. And then most of it's machinery. Gotta switch over to my, lighting material.
And I think
so.
this could extend to the equipment as well, like, because the different weapons have all their different specialties. So you can have one loadout where you have your sword that's more specifically geared towards magic, and then you can have all your materia set up with that in mind.
Yeah, because that's the other thing that's kind of frustrating is, like, the game definitely wants you to, like, swap out, like, materia a lot and, like, set things for very specific situations. But, like, the UI isn't bad by any means, but it could still be cleaner. and that the loadouts I think would go a huge way to addressing that.
It would give
That
you a
actually
reason to actually use the differences in these weapons, because I think, for the most part, I think people are going to stick with the Buster Sword, for example, because it's balanced.
I did.
But if this loadout idea were to be implemented, it would actually give people a reason to actually want to use the other weapons in different situations.
Yeah.
Speaking of the
Is there a way to
UI,
change-
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Is there a way to change your... Before I make this complaint, I want to ask if there is a way to change your entire materia set on a weapon and give it to somebody else all at once.
The easiest way to do that is, and it is kind of squirreled away, I didn't notice it till my second run through, but when you're on the character menu, you can hit R1 to bring up everyone's materia, and then use triangle to quickly swap it.
So
I accidentally found that.
I guess you didn't know how to do that the entire game and individually.
Yeah,
Like I said, I didn't
randomly
discover it
found
till
it.
second
to other
run.
characters.
They do not communicate it
yeah.
well. I was really annoyed.
Yeah, I accidentally
actually-
found it as well, and I was like, they should have, told us.
Yeah, with the amount of tutorials they give you at the beginning, it's like, that should have been one of them.
Small little gripe I have too is I figured out too that you could use out of combat. You can hold L1 to use items.
That's what I was going to bring up. That's
multiple
exactly what I was going to bring up.
But I still think that's really shitty, because it's super slow and will just kind of get caught if you're in mid animation and won't let you keep doing it anymore. And I don't know why it had to be so slow out of combat.
Because of the animations. It's always an animation thing when it comes to these sort of slowdowns in combat games.
It's just weird that they don't let you use it in your inventory when you're not in combat. I don't like.
Yeah, it is a frustration.
Every time I had to heal up my entire party with some of my potions, I was like, okay, time to hold L1 and hit X 10 times before I switch to the
This
next
game
character.
really just hated the idea of making items good.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, even though a lot of times those items saved my ass more than I can count. Because as much as I use Cura and stuff like that, there are some times where just using High Potion it's considerably faster than casting the spell. It's way faster to use a healing item compared to a magic spell. So might as well just use that instead.
I know we want to move from combat, but there's one last thing I want to discuss.
Well, it's such an integral
but this is a bigger
feature.
topic. This is, how do you think the bosses were designed on the whole?
Fantastic.
Very
'Cause I
good
don't think we
overall.
went into that too in
As
depth.
a collective, really good, but there are some standout stinkers.
Yeah. Hell House.
Yes.
I
Hell
actually really
House
like
is
Hell House.
great once you figure out the gimmick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's literally just elemental mix and match.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
Once you figure that out, it's less tedious, but until you figure it out, Jesus
Yeah, well,
Christ.
That Hell House is just the definition of trial.
Well,
and
when
error.
you only had two
yeah.
elements to work with, it's not fun.
Exactly.
Oh,
See,
no.
I didn't really run into the trial and error too much because of the assess materia, which was kind of I used assess materia in every single fight that I entered. So, I don't know if this takes away from you figuring out the fight or not, but knowing what to do, because when you assess materia Hell House, it immediately says use the opposite magic from what
I
you're
just figured that out from years of Pokemon and JRPGs of oh, it looks icy.
Yeah.
Use
Yeah.
fire. I just
I
went,
figured that out right away, but again, I just didn't have the right loadout, and it was just
that's
so
fair.
annoying.
That's fair.
Yeah, and it comes out to that.
Yeah, and
it
that's where
comes
the
back to
trial
that
and
whole
error comes
discussion.
in.
No, yeah.
I thought the boss fights on the whole were my favorite part of the comp.
That's
they
when the
are
combat really gets to
fantastic.
truly shine, but there's also some ones that are just genuine frustrations. I think the standout for that, and it's one of the best boss designs because I kind of dig it, but Eligor was one of, I think, my least favorite boss fights of the entire game.
I think on the whole,
Which
the
one was
boss
that one?
fights were good, but I think a consistent issue with them is that they're just sponges. They just
Yeah.
take too long to take down.
I think some of them... I think more the problem for me than them being HP sponges is that some of them don't have the most, some of their phases might take too long is what I
Yeah, I think
Some of
that's
them
probably
don't
the
have,
best way to put
yeah.
it.
a good... because some of them have a really good variety of... the Hell House is, it starts out one way, then it goes another way, then it goes another way, and it's, this constantly evolving, fucking battle to the death against this weird house with a face robot thing. Like,
I still can't believe they had the Hell House in
but then
there.
you
I
fight
really thought they were going to cut it.
then you fight like the weird fish in chapter 17, and I'm like,
the robot eel.
Oh yeah,
thing?
the swordipedal.
Yeah,
and I'm like, this
Yeah.
has like maybe 2 attacks. Like,
Well, here's the thing, like that like attack where it just sends down these balls of electricity onto the floor, that caught me so off guard the first time. I was like, how the hell do you dodge that? Oh, I just run in a circle around. Okay, I'm good.
So I actually,
I think they
of,
were like the highlight of my playthrough, but definitely some of them just lacked phase variety. I think that made just kind of made them feel like a slog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even the Barrett and Aerith one.
Barrett.
Barrett and Aerith.
Barrett.
Barrett and Aerith one at the end of the game is like, it has a lot of phases and they do some cool stuff, but it just like some of the phases last way longer than they should, and I don't know why they were divided up the way they were.
I liked I feel like such a fake gamer right now for forgetting all these names, but the one where you have to divert materials in order to
That's
like
the Airbuster.
Airbuster, thank
yeah.
you. Like using the Shinra like area and using that to manipulate how the boss works in the fight. I loved that, and I wish there was more of it.
Yeah, I think the Airbuster's probably the best fight overall. Like,
Yeah, because you have a
personally.
lot more agency in it.
Not just that, but it's also like I just found it to be one of the most fun to engage with and strategize around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
my favorite would
You
probably
guys
be the
wanna-
last one.
Yeah,
Oh,
there's
yeah.
also that. Like that's the one exception,
Yeah.
but that's also the last one. I also have other things to compare that to, so it becomes like its own individual tier list almost.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, we can't really talk about that right now.
Yeah.
And now we could probably move from combat.
Yeah, now we
Yeah.
can segue to the story. Like, okay, so what is everyone's, without going into like the ending into depth?
How did everyone feel before chapter
Yeah,
17?
how'd you feel?
Before chapter 17, how's everybody feeling?
Before chapter 17, I was feeling like I was never too plussed about how they were handling Sephiroth. I'm still not that plussed about how they handled Sephiroth. It's not, I don't even know why we like put a spoiler tag on it. He shows up 2 minutes in.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
there's no secret.
No, the secret is about like his involvement in the ending.
Yeah,
That's more
but
the
you
secret.
also show me one human being alive who sees him in the first 5 minutes and isn't like, "Oh, you're the final boss. Nice to meet you."
Yeah, he has air of I am the
Like
final boss.
it's not even subtle. Like who the fuck else was it going to be?
And we also went like
You
and
want
we've also
Soto, you came
gone,
to the
like,
wrong
an hour and a
place.
half, so I think like spoiler talk can kind of be fine at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard some people go and say like, oh hey, like if you want to, get into Final Fantasy for the first time, play remake, and I'm like, no.
That's what I was thinking until the ending.
Exactly.
I was like, oh, this seems like you could probably get
entry
into
point.
this if you don't know.
Yeah.
I think someone can play this without experiencing the first one and get like a decent time, but they're definitely going to be missing out on a lot of key moments because, as I think Ryan and Cora were saying much earlier, is that like Nomura actively wants you to acknowledge this as a remake. Like he and the rest of the team are like actively pointing at bits like, remember that scene? Yeah, what's going on there? So I think you're going to be missing out on that element of it without having experienced the original.
I feel that calling this a remake is a misnomer. This is a reimagining.
I think it's.
Yeah.
I get that mentality. I actually don't. I don't know, and now we're getting into semantics of what a remake is.
Sure.
And that's
No,
where it gets
sure.
really
Yeah.
complicated.
Sure.
I think this game really brought up that discussion more than almost any other
Oh,
game.
100%.
Oh, by a wide
I think
margin.
that was
Memory.
kind of in a lot of ways the point, because it's like, can you think of any other game that's a remake that fucking slaps the title remake in its title?
No, yeah, this is a first for sure.
Like and it's like if they wanted to be any more like on the nose
shit.
about it, they would have called it semicolon make.
Remako.
Like how they did
Rebuild.
Remind.
Oh,
it
that's great.
Rebuild.
I would have loved
Yeah, like
that.
I've seen someone say
would've
that would have been
dug- I
too
would've
on the
dug
nose,
that.
but I was like, I think that would have been the best way to approach it, because then it would have felt a little bit more like, oh, okay, like now it's very clear about what you're doing, and I don't think people would have clued
Right.
in that close, because that's just how Nomura does.
I
But
don't
do you
wanna
think
get
that was
into
part of the
ending too
idea?
much, but like I feel like it almost had to be deceptive in nature. For
Yeah.
it to
I was
work
about
the
to
way
go
that
there.
was-
Yeah.
I know there are lots of people out there who are like, this was false marketing, this was whatever, like
No.
all this stuff, and I'm like, I understand, but also this is a twist. Like,
I think we've all mentioned this at one point, I think, but I think without going too much into it right now, it genuinely feels like a Metal Gear Solid 2 scenario.
Yeah.
That's literally what I've been comparing it to over.
Yeah,
and
I've
over.
been comparing to that, like, as soon as I beat it, I was like, that was Metal Gear Solid 2.
It's Metal Gear Solid
And-
2 and like how deceptive it is, depending on how you want to call
Yeah.
it. And then
But
the other
the-
comparison that's very close is the Ava rebuild films.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
Although I will say the difference between this and both of those, I feel, is both of those had. It generally felt like they had some level of kind of contempt almost for their audience, especially MGS2. But like,
No, that's 4. You're thinking about 4.
both of them can.
Kojima
I don't
just
think Kojima's liked anyone who's bought his game in years.
Kojima and Anno in a way very much have contempt for their audiences.
Yeah, but meanwhile, this is like almost reassuring to a point where it's bordering on coddling. It almost feels like they're doing a lot of that like meta-analysis on the nature of remakes as a way to be like, no, it's okay. Don't worry. I know this is going to be different, and we're going to change some things, and it's going to be very alarming.
It's okay,
for you.
baby.
But just stay calm and stay optimistic and trust us.
Let's be a little real
We
here.
got Cloud in the dress. It's okay. Everything's
Yeah,
gonna be
exactly.
alright.
And like
It's funny
on the
that
one
you
hand,
say
it's
that
like,
because-
yeah, that's really cool. That's great. I love it. Thank you for being there for me, and I appreciate it. But at the same time, I'm a fucking adult. Just give me the thing.
I think here's if you want my opinion on this, considering how people have been reacting to it, could you imagine how much worse the discourse would be if they did treat people in that, okay, you're an adult, here you go?
well, you know what's weird about it is that I've seen a lot of takes that essentially are like looking at the whispers and saying that it is a direct call out towards the people. Like, I don't think there's any question that the whispers are symbolic of remake expectation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people take it to mean they are actively antagonizing the fans who wanted
Nah,
these things.
I don't buy.
I can
No.
buy
see
that.
that, and I've had this discussion with Ryan plenty, because we've been kind of trying to like piece this together, and like, because there's a lot of ways you can kind of internalize that, and in some ways it does seem like it is saying like that idea bad. You are bad for thinking and wanting that, but you also look at, you know, what the whispers are in the story, and you know where they appear, how they appear, all that stuff. If we're looking at it within
I'm
the
gonna say
context
right
of
now,
an
interrupt real
analogy.
quick, I'm just going to say right now that I'm gonna do no holds barred spoiler right now, so we can just say
Yeah.
things we
Yeah,
wanna
yeah,
say.
let's just
we're
go
definitely
for
at
it.
that point.
I don't want to have to tiptoe around this, so for people listening,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say from here to the end, it's gonna be spoilers, no holds barred, just as a warning.
Yeah. But yeah, just to continue that thought, I think there is some level of like the creators kind of seem to understand that fan expectations aren't malicious. It's more just them being kind of
Yeah.
frustrated and kind of using the whispers to kind of speak about that. But when you look at it, it's like the whispers are not a malevolent force. They're only malevolent in the sense that they're forcing the characters to do what they want, but it's not like they heal Barrett, they save Aerith, they do things that help the party as much as hinder. So in that way, I don't really think the creators are being hateful and spiteful as much as just venting in a creative way.
See, I at no point had the feeling that what they were doing with the meta, commentary was malicious at any point, because of how many small details were put into this game.
Yeah.
From Wall Market to, the Sector 5 slums, everything was pretty much to a T perfect in terms of environmental design, in terms of, small little side quests and story details, that any meta commentary that they did was not malicious, in my opinion. It may have been a little bit out of frustration, but when you have a game like Final Fantasy VII, there is no way you will meet everyone's expectations. So turning that into an aspect of the story is pretty
I'm
great.
convinced that the whispers are like manifestations of the developers' like fears and anxieties in wanting to stay true to the original, but also wanting to create a new experience, but fearing the backlash that would come from it, and maybe feeling like they're not up to it, because like being in a position of remaking what is widely considered one of the most beloved and important games in gaming, like just in general, like I can't imagine the amount of stress that the developers were going through, like making this game. And I feel like that manifests through the whispers. And I feel that the ending in particular is supposed to represent that the developers have gained the confidence to move forward with their new vision. They've broken the shackles of fate, quote unquote. And that represents like they have now decided, you know what? Come what may, we're going to tell the story the way we want to do it.
Yeah, one of my
even
absolute...
that I'm.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Oh, go ahead. I was just going to say, my only kind of qualm with that is, it's not like they weren't already changing a ton of shit along the way.
Sure, but the whispers always made attempts to revert it back, because I'm sure that
well, not
most of the time.
Like, I mean, Sephiroth is right there, and I'd say that's a pretty big one in and of itself for a good number of reasons. But there's also stuff like, what was it, like, freaking, how much of, like, Chapter 4 plays out, for instance. That is such a radical change in terms of characterization.
But also now we're pulling at threads, because if you refixed Sephiroth, then it doesn't really work within the context of, like, the meta commentary stuff, or the ghosts outside of the meta commentary stuff, Like the changes are part and parcel with the meta commentary of the nature of these changes and so on and so forth,
Like, didn't they say, if I remember correctly, like before they go into the portal, that Aerith and Red 13 were basically saying that the live stream has no effect on Sephiroth? Like, that the live stream, like, because they say that the whispers are basically like sort of embodiments of the live stream. They're sort of
I think they say whispers of the planet or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. But I get the feeling that they're part of the live stream. There's some sort of manifestation of the live stream. And so if Sephiroth is not affected by them, then I think it kind of makes sense that he can't appear where he does and, sort of start guiding things towards a different direction. And my opinion, like, I kind of go with Dan about the whole, like, fear and anxiety thing, because Sephiroth does, like, extend his hand, and it's like, look, you can join me, and we can do something completely different, and Cloud just straight up rejects it. It's like, no, I'm not doing that. And that, to me, was, like, the developers kind of having that back and forth of, like, what they want to be different, but also having to stay true to what fans want.
Well, I was going to say earlier, one of my favorite lines of dialogue in this game, and I don't think we're breaking many people's minds and, saying the whole, meta commentary stuff and all that stuff. But one of my favorite lines is Aerith, before going in the portal, saying, like, Aerith Tifa says, what's beyond that? It's like, oh, boundless, terrifying freedom, and then yada, 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 and then it's, if we go there, we're changing more than fate. Maybe that's why I hesitated. It's like that more than anything is the writer, Nomura, whoever it was that wrote that specific line of dialogue, looking at the players going, we know that these changes are unsettling for you because they're unsettling for us. Like, we're not changing this just because we think it's going to be better and that's it. we're changing this to see what we can do and make a new experience.
I think it's worth noting, if I recall correctly, in some way, the head of the creative team of this game were involved with the original in some way.
A large portion of them, yes.
Already.
Yeah.
Not like everybody involved with it, obviously, but like.
I think the only person that was part of the
involved
core original team is the person who made
Sakaguchi.
Sakaguchi's pretty much one of the only core people not involved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so but people are viewing it as like I understand people who are not into what's going on.
yeah, definitely.
But I've seen some things that are kind of like to the effect of there are people in the creative team now encroaching on something that should never have been changed by like an interpretation of like these new people are now coming in and changing everything and like, but I don't know that that's really the perspective that's going on.
I mean,
here.
It still ends pretty much where the first game ends. They still leave Midgar trying to find Sephiroth. Like, the goal is still the same. It's just how are they gonna get there that seems to be changing.
Yeah, I was
Zack
gonna
alive?
say that's a big one.
Someone had to say it. Someone had to say it. I don't necessarily read it that way, but it's hard to not read it that way.
Yeah, it like then you get into the whole is this an alternate universe type thing and
It's some kind of alternate universe because it has that different stamp that you see.
Not only that, but they went with the Crisis Core version of what happened to Zack, and not the original.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we still don't know because they do at the end when they're like passing Zack and Cloud and that weird, meshing of timelines thing, that they're reaching the point in where Zack gets gunned down and found by Shinra. So we still don't know if he's alive or dead, and whether or not the things have really changed, but it does feel like they're going with the whole, he's still alive.
It's hard to say.
I sincerely don't know how that could even work, because that Zack dying is Cloud's backstory. Like, that's the origin. That's the reason he is the way he is. How did he get the Buster Sword and all of that? Like, I'm sure there's going to be answers to these if it turns out to be the case, but, like, weird, right? Like,
it's very weird.
I don't. Am I alone in thinking that?
It's very weird.
Can I quickly read a quote from the original director, who's a producer on Remake? Speaking, it's Kitase, the director of the original, who's a producer on Remake, and also was the one who produced doing the remake in the first place. I, along with Nomura-san and Nojima-san, who were involved with the remake, were involved with the original FF7. We were the people who created it, so in that sense, we don't think anything is untouchable. That isn't to say we're changing everything. Of course, within Square Enix and across the globe, there are people who think it's on a holy scale. That there isn't anything we can touch or play around with. But we believe we know the balance between what we can change versus what needs to be protected. So I think that says, that's the end of the quote. I think that says more than anything that they understand that there are certain elements that are just like, no, that needs to stay the same, or that needs to be, protected, as they said. Versus I think there's some stuff here and there that, we can play around with and, experiment and, change up whatnot. So I think they understand that, there are certain things that, need to be preserved.
That's the impression I got from the game as a whole. There are some aspects that are different, but they never diverge too much from the original, chain of events. The only one that really felt new was Chapter 4, because they introduced, Roche, and, motorcycle vroom vroom guy. And... come on, that's basically his whole character. My motorcycle goes boom, boom.
And that to me is the greatest frustration of this whole thing, is it has all of these meta elements trying to justify that, we should be allowed to do different stuff. Meanwhile, Chapter 4 is right there in kind of the best part of the entire game, and it's all new. It's all new, and I genuinely think it's the strongest part of the whole thing.
But it's new,
really
it's
good.
new, but still within the context of the old.
Exactly.
But that's but I think that's the thing is that if they want to tell an entirely new story, or at least one that diverts more, which I think is what they're kind of, aiming at with the next one, is like, oh, there's, big changes to come. And this is like them just kind of like, softening the blow a little bit. And so it's like, yeah, like, Roche could have been in the original, but it's like changing stuff like Biggs being alive and, stuff with Wedge. Those are like bigger changes that are even like Zack possibly being alive in another timeline, whatever have you. Those are changes where it's like actively, going in its own direction.
Yeah. Like, I blanked.
Yeah, it's all good.
Here's what I think. Like, I think, because from what I got of the ending, I think the Whispers are just gone from now on. I think they're just gone. I think that's the impression I got, that they're no longer going to be affecting the main narrative. If that's the case, then I kind of see their viewpoint, where they go and say, okay, we want to change Final Fantasy VII in some sort of substantial way, and so they use the Whispers in this one title alone to get that massive change at the end, and then once they're gone, everything can be like Chapter 4 from now on, where it's not the Whispers intervening or anything, it's just
But this is also kind of where I come back to, like, how worth it are those meta elements if you already justified it better by just fucking doing it?
Right.
But I think the meta element is just an extra factor to the actual change.
Yeah, and I think that's fair, but I think you also kind of see where I
see where your frustrations are coming from. I 100% do. We've also had that conversation, like, I think like 20 times, just arguing in DMs. But yeah, I think the meta aspect, I think, is just more like an extra sprinkling on just the already changing of the story they were already doing.
But so much of it is dedicated.
I almost feel like the Whispers were more for the developers than it was for us.
Oh, it definitely was.
Yeah,
but I think they tried to entangle it into the actual change.
Yeah.
Like, King, you said you haven't beaten Final Fantasy VII, right? Like the original?
No, but I feel like I have, because I know so much about, like...
from the perspective of somebody who's just beaten, like, you said you got past Midgar, and then you didn't get past too much else. As somebody who's just gone up to that point and played nothing else, like, what resonated... Did the ending hit you a lot harder, or was it kind of more interesting to you?
Well, like, very obviously I don't have the same baggage going into this ending. Like, I can't really relate to somebody who feels betrayed by it, you know what I mean? Because I cannot possibly feel betrayed by an ending like this, having not played the original really that much until, like, a year ago. So... like, when I went into this, I'm like, okay, I'm expecting it to be a faithful remake. And I am kind of sick of remakes that don't want to be anything more than they are. Like the fucking Link's Awakening remake, or the... there's something else that came out that was, like... it might just be... maybe it was just Resident Evil 3 I'm thinking of, but I don't know. But that was different. Like, that was disappointing for different reasons. Like,
Secret of Mana.
I think... well, I'm not into that.
Spyro?
It's also kind of a remake. I don't like the idea of that kind of a remake where it's like...
Shadow of the Colossus?
No, I guess it's more the idea of, like, I don't like remakes that are just the same game, except there are some graphical touches and they add some new things that are like for the Link's Awakening remake, for example, it was like they changed the graphical style and then they like added new mini games and stuff, and it just felt kind of like, why are you even trying?
I would say even
like,
the worst example
I don't mean that
is
to be patronizing to
Spyro.
people. I don't mean that. Yeah, I don't mean that to be patronizing, but it's kind of like, why are we dedicating so much to this if it's not saying something of its own that I can take away that the original didn't already say?
I think that's why a lot of movies these days are doing soft reboots. It's their way of getting around that issue, where they want to remake something pretty much one-to-one, but they know that a lot of people don't want just a one-to-one, so they kind of try to, like, give everybody their fair share. Like, oh hey, it's not a 1-to-1 remake, but it kind of is. And it's this weird middle ground. And I'm kind of with you on that, where if I have a remake of a game, I don't necessarily want it to be a 1-to-1. In certain cases, sure, but for the most part, I'd rather have a title that's changing enough for it to feel different. Like, RE2 Remake feels different, not just because of certain, story changes or whatever, or extensions of story beats, but also because of how
I've
the
said
game
this before,
plays.
but like the original is still there. It's actually more widely available now than it's ever been before. You can get it on Steam. You can download on your Switch, PS4, whatever. It's so easy to play the original Final Fantasy VII. I don't think there's a need to be offended at the very idea of them making changes, because the original is so easy to play.
To their credit,
the thing is, I
get, to be fair,
the thing is, the question I would have, and the question I feel this really raises, is what is the point of remakes supposed to be at large? Because, like, on the one hand, I agree with all of this very thoroughly, especially as someone who's played FF7. I would ideally, like, in a lot of ways, this is kind of the best I could have hoped for. I got to find something new in Final Fantasy VII again. That is so cool. I don't know if I'll get over that anytime soon. At the same time, though, looking at this game, for instance, like, if you didn't like the original Final Fantasy VII, I can't recommend this to you. I can't do that to you. This isn't it's not only not a replacement, it's not even a meaningful substitute for the original.
That's what I was going to say.
So who is this for? What's the point of it?
To their credit, the director, Nomura, and I think maybe it was Kitase, were saying in interviews, we really hope playing Remake makes people want to go play the original.
Yes.
Because they literally were very transparent of, like, this is it by no means meant to be a substitute. And in fact, like, 7 is its origins, and we don't want to devalue
and that's definitely a healthier perspective to have, like, than most, I feel. But at the same time, like, again, it begs the question of what's the point of the remake itself? Because if it's just to kind of, like, give more to people who already loved it, like, cool, I guess, but you're also not going to, like, bring that many people over who were looking at the original Final Fantasy VII and being like, oh, that looks old and antiquated, I don't want to bother with that, plus I hate random encounters and turn-based gameplay, I want nothing to do with that, so I'm just going to keep watching
I don't know if that's
videos.
necessarily true. Both my younger sister and my dad, for the longest time, didn't want to play Final Fantasy VII specifically because of how old it was and the turn-based combat. And now they're excited to play it because they're more, it's something that interests them more.
They're more invested. They're more invested.
I'm sure the number is higher than 0 without a doubt, but I don't know if it's, like, going to be as big as, like, the amount of people who, for instance, were able to play the Resident Evil 2 remake and get basically the experience of Resident Evil 2 from that and walk away knowing, okay, I've played that now.
But I think that, again, circles back to the issue that this game kind of, in a way, presents on itself, and it is, depending on how you look at it, a negative, where it's like, this isn't a remake in that it's a replacement in any way. It's better to say it's a companion piece or like a pseudo-sequel, because it's clearly using the events of the original as a jumping-off point for this game, because there is, timeline shenanigans, and it implies that the things happen in the original already happened in its own way. So
the whole Ava rebuild.
It's very iffy on what that means, and so it.
I mean, technically, it even takes things from Advent Children and from Crisis Core, so it's like, it's not just Final Fantasy VII.
They took literal shots, like literal clips from the movie, and put it in like during those like flashback sequences when they.
Yep.
I was like, really, guys?
Look, I defend like this change and stuff like that quite a bit, but even that, I was like just rolling my eyes a bit, like, Jesus Christ, dudes, like have a little restraint.
And that brings up a criticism I kind of have, and this is less about the game and more about like the discussion that's been having. And I told you guys this before we started, is that like with the whole timeline, Sephiroth clearly, is from, future events. He knows what's going to happen. And to a certain extent, Aerith seems to know because she's Cetra, so, she speaks to the planet, what have you. But I've seen a lot of speculation that the Sephiroth that we encounter in this game is from Advent Children. And there's a fair amount of points that you can give that, like, okay, he has, like, the big black wing. That's kind of been part of his design since Advent Children, but if you want to say that is that design, sure. And then the 3 enemies you fight before him, the I can't remember what they're called in the game, but the Arbiters of Fate, the 3 ones you fight, those are supposed to be, because their weapons are like a fist, 2 guns, and a sword. That's meant to reference the 3 mooks the 3 villains in Advent Children. I can't for the life of me remember their names, so apologies. But I do want to bring up the fact that, okay, it's Advent Children. That's neat. What does that necessarily bring to the table rather than it just being Sephiroth in general?
Yeah, like, that's my whole issue with a lot of this fan servicey stuff at large. It's like, again, as a fan, I love it, I dig it, I'm here for it, I think it's fun and all of that, but, like, the moment I step back and look at it critically, I'm like, okay, but why?
To be fair, though, like, we're left with this conundrum. Like, this is part 1. We don't know if it's going to tie into something larger in the next part, or, like, so...
Bingo.
I hear you, I definitely hear you. But at the same time, I don't know if it's a totally fair criticism just yet, because we don't have the full picture.
But that's also inherent in the problem, is that we can't really critically analyze this to any meaningful degree, and that's kind of frustrating in its own way.
Yeah.
Well, what I'll say is, like, because, like, I totally get that without question, but at the same time, I also think of, like, Mass Effect 1. And that's a game that didn't, like, it didn't bring out, like, all of the Reapers immediately or anything, but, like, you slowly learned about them, and more importantly, there was still, like, a through line within that individual part 1, so you still got an individual satisfying story out of it, rather than just, like, a to be continued. And I realize this isn't necessarily the same thing exactly, but, like, you sell me one product and you tell me repeatedly that this is going to be its own distinct thing, I kind of expect it to be its own distinct thing,
Like, here's the bigger question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I think the biggest, the biggest problem that I actually have with this game, because I really, really... Do I love it? I guess I kind of... I think it's great, is what I'll say. I think it's a great... Like, I really, really loved my time with it.
Yeah.
But the biggest major problem that, like, the overarching problem that leads into all of my small problems is that they not only wanted this to be considered its own video game, but they also decided that it would be great to make Midgar its own video game. And those two things are single-handedly the biggest problem I have with it, because it threads back into, like, anything that I don't really like about it is kind of based on their not like, because on its own it's like, we want to make this its own game. I'm like, its own game to be played, like, to be fulfilled by only playing it, even if it's part of a larger story. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. But then they also want it to be only based on Midgar, and I'm like, one of these things don't feel like the other, like, it doesn't feel like that translates the way that they think that it does.
Just because
then you
they
have
basically thought it was the
where,
end of
like,
disc 1.
In the original game, to, like, from what I've played of it, it worked to not have Sephiroth because it was only like 5 or 6 hours to do Midgar compared to the rest of the game. So when you don't learn about Sephiroth to the very end, it's kind of like, okay, that makes sense. They wouldn't, like, show him in the first hour.
Yeah, they built up to him.
So I understand that, but then you get to this, and they not only want to cover all of Midgar, but they want to make it its own kind of Final Fantasy game that's akin to, like, other kinds of games in the series. And then I'm like, well, I can understand the impulse to show Sephiroth more readily, because the point at which this game would end, Sephiroth would barely, like, the only thing of Sephiroth to even show up in Midgar is the blood trails and him having killed the president.
And you see, for me, that's kind of like one of the biggest things that's gotten left behind is the fact that we see him at all. Because so much of how he was built up in the original game was like, it was so much like ambiance and like little hints and like murmurs here and there.
Yeah, and I sympathize with that, but like I'm also like, if they ended this game without show, like, because I think the context is completely different for what, like, because if they don't show Sephiroth at all, it's kind of like, well, are we gonna wait like 10 years to ever encounter him? Because he's not going to show up in this game at all, and like, if you're building up to him, I guess, is the main threat. It's like, I don't know.
We already fought him, so it's
and I guess it's inseparable. Like, you cannot divorce this from what already happened in the original is the problem. So of course these comparisons to the original are always going to pop up. That's just how it works, because it's a remake. So then, like, it feels like it all wraps back into this decision for them to not only make this, like, they wanted it to not just feel like part one of the story, they wanted it to feel like its own game, but they were also like, yeah, we'll cut it off at Midgar, and something about that just feels wrong.
There's this very weird here's clash between with how this game handles itself, and I think this is kind of in its own way a core of where a lot of conflicts on how people feel about this game somewhat originate from, in terms of people who've played it and try to give it a fair shake, but whether they liked it or didn't like it, is the game actively wants you to confront that it is in part a remake, it is changing things and all that stuff, and it's like, but it is still like, oh, this is FF7, this is FF7's story. But then you have, on the other hand, it has a lot of moments where it's like, but this is different though. This is something that's changing. You know, Sephiroth is here because different context in the world. I think the directors even said, like, hey, you know, Sephiroth is this very widely known thing, so, like, it's kind of harder to hide him and be subtle in that same way that the original game was.
That's
so
where
it's
I
this
was
constant
thinking,
clash
yeah.
of, like, modern context and, you know, cultural zeitgeist influence versus, like, trying to stay faithful in a lot of cases, and it's, like, constantly at ends with each other.
Here's my mindset is, and this is kind of like a question for all of you, if the game had ended after the last set piece, you know, on the motorcycle fighting wrecking ball guy, I always forget his name, if the game had just ended there, like it did in the original, where they get to the bridge, you know, the unfinished bridge, and then they say, oh, we're gonna go fight Sephiroth, we're gonna go find him, and it was just that, would you have felt satisfied with the entire experience?
I don't think so, but at the same time, though, I don't necessarily think adding that fight there is inherently the worst idea ever, because, like, yeah, you do probably need something big and bombastic, and the roller thing is not what you close out your big game on. That's just not
fun. I don't mean, like, from a boss perspective. I just mean in general, from a story perspective, because the original story, you know, Midgar's only like 5 to 6 hours, like KingK was saying. So it ends with that boss because it knows it has more to come.
I think a lot of us wouldn't, simply because we've played the game, so we know what, like, if it ends there, it's like, well, yeah, of course it would end there.
But that's the thing, a lot of people also want that. That's the big discussion that's happening.
But at the same time, I guess my question is, what would be that fundamentally different? Because, like, we're still effectively in the same narrative place before and after that boss fight. The only difference is now we've had a metatextual conversation about what the future of the remakes will be.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's why when somebody says, "Oh, it's changed everything like completely," I'm like, "But did it really?"
I think it does change it in the sense that now we have no real idea what is to come. It's literally like the unknown journey will continue, and funny enough, they say it's terrifying. Yeah. They even say that's terrifying on its own. It just
Sephiroth is saying like, "Oh, be careful! You know where you're gonna go. That doesn't exist."
Yeah, what's to come doesn't quite exist yet. And it's like, yeah, so they know, and to its credit, despite my issues maybe with its execution, because I think that's where my gripes tend to lie, is less in what it did and more how it did it. But I do respect that they wanted to make it so that it leaves off on leaving people in a way excited, because now it's not just like, oh yeah, it ended where it was supposed to, and now wait for the next part. It's like, okay, now you guys all get to wait for the next part and like speculate and get excited or maybe fearful, and everybody's on the same page now.
Yeah, somebody said it best. I don't know who said it, but they basically said that the feelings that you're having right now are pretty much exactly what you felt when you first beat the first disc in Final Fantasy VII all the way back in the 90s or whenever you played it. The feeling of you don't know where the story is going to go. And if that's what you were looking for as an overall experience, then it nailed it. If you were looking for just a one-to-one, even though they pretty much said from the beginning in every interview that was not going to be the case, then I can understand and even sympathize with the fact that you're disappointed, but I kind of have to go and say that I like it more that I don't know where it's going to go. I'm cautiously optimistic. Like with Nomura and Nojima and everybody's background, it's wise to be like, okay, this is interesting, but how are they gonna keep this going? What are they gonna do next?
I've constantly tried to just be like understanding like of people who are not into this, because I know deep, like whenever I go like and I say something and I'm like, I have to keep in mind that like people, I'm coming from a background of not having played the game and from a background of having loved Kingdom Hearts all my life. So I'm like, am I like too colored in my opinion that like this is like the ending of Final Fantasy VII Remake is like one of the most refreshing things I've seen in a long time, and it's probably my favorite part of the game.
Well,
I'm not sure how like popular that opinion is.
Well, that's the thing
but
about art is it's inherently, gonna take risks. Whether those risks are gonna pay off or the execution was good, that's almost an entirely separate subject. But like, yeah, like there is gonna be those like, bold decisions of like, hey, what if we just went an entirely different direction with this and kind of, changed, because it's like a 20-year-old game at this point and everybody knows it, so let's change things up. Because if they did, I think we've already said this before, but it's like if they did do the game as it was, I'm sure people would have been happy, but it would have left no cultural impact. I think.
Would we be
I think
talking?
people would have been like, yeah, that'd be fun,
yeah.
But then it would just move on.
Would we even be talking about
Yeah,
it
that's the
right
real
now if the game didn't end the way it did?
We would have already been we would
I don't
have
think
already
so.
finished our discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah. This game came out 2.5 weeks ago, and we're still talking about it. That's pretty long in game discussion.
But then again, at the same time, like, if the ending had been, like, actual footage of, like, Tetsuya Nomura just flipping us off, we'd probably talk about that for the same length of
Yeah,
time.
like not all discussion is self-serving as good.
That's a secret Easter
Like
egg.
that is inherently true. But again, like that comes with risks, and sometimes people don't like risk. They don't like change. Like I use the example of Last Jedi as a perfect example, where it like really split people on how people felt about it. But whether you like it or not, like that movie actually did try to make some, bold decisions compared to the follow-up movie, which was like the most safe movie it could have possibly been.
Yeah.
I was kind of thinking that earlier in the day, and here's kind of what I think about that. And it's that whether you agree or disagree entirely with the people who don't like the movie, their perspective is basically that they feel that, at least most of them feel, that the movie didn't respect them as fans of the material. Like, again, whether or not you agree or disagree is not, the point. The point is what they say they feel. With Remake, I don't think anybody, even if they dislike where it's going, has genuinely said, I was not serviced as a fan. Like, I was not being treated kindly as a fan. They just don't like the idea of the, what, you know, people call the Nomura
Honestly,
bullshit.
Oh yeah.
Where it's, they don't like that one concept. They don't feel that they're being treated wrong, or they're being maliciously told, hey, fuck you, we could just do what we want. It's more of, hey, let's all be in this together, and whether or not you're up for that, most people are kind of, like, they don't like it, but they're not necessarily.
Well, that's the
frothing at the
double-edged
mouth.
sword, though, of how faithful it was for the most part, for like 90% of the game, how faithful it was, because it does give that tantalizing, like, this is what it, you know, could be, but then it kind of rips it away. So I think that's where some people are coming from, where it's like, it was so fucking close to exactly what I wanted, and then it, you know, hard swerved.
Yeah.
At the very end.
I think that's where, like, depending on how you, either you fell on your feet and you're like, okay, cool, we'll see what comes next, or you fell fucking right on your ass and you're like, wow, that sucked.
Well, like, it comes into that thing what Dan was talking about, like, if the game didn't have that ending, would we still be talking about it? So if the game was, like, 65, 70% the same, but the last 30% or so was completely different, would we be having the same level of ferocity that we're having
Probably
right now in terms of
not.
talking
Yeah.
about the ending?
Yeah, I get you.
Yeah,
think
probably
that,
not.
Like, I think the reason that discussions of this can turn so easily into, like, because I've seen a bit of, like, back and forth about this. Not all of it, but, you know, you could say that about anything that's popular that's being discussed. But, like,
Yeah.
not all of it's in great faith or whatever. But, like, I think a lot of the reason that people are arguing so incessantly about it is because, like, even at the best of times, I think we're all kind of arguing in its own meta space about where we're, like, extrapolating where we think it will end in the final part based on this sole decision, you know? Like, I think it's more about people are very afraid of what is going to now happen rather than what has, like, immediate, because I see a lot of people who are saying, oh, what if they make Aerith live, or what if they do this, what if they do this,
Yeah.
what if they do this, and I don't see that many people who are like, oh, Zack should have stayed dead. Like, I see that a lot less than people saying, what if this happens? And that's why
I think that's because a lot of people are still kind of on the high of it more than anything else, but I do genuinely agree with you on that. Because I've been in discussions where I've heard a lot of people, or a decent chunk of people, being like, I don't know about bringing Zack back. Like, it's, and again, the issue of this being very open-ended and vague and kind of meant for speculation is we kind of don't know to what end. Like, yeah, they maybe brought Zack back. They seem to bring Biggs back and maybe Jesse. Will that be an improvement? Like, you can't even really guess.
It's the fear of the unknown.
Well, I think, like, I'm not looking to... I think the fundamental difference between me and maybe somebody else is that I'm not looking for this to improve anything about Final Fantasy VII. In fact, after I beat the remake, I said to myself, wow, I really think that I need to finish the original to see how those events played out originally, and to maybe get, like, an appreciation for the things that they're trying differently, even if it falls flat on its face.
Yeah.
And that's why I like the ending so much, because I'm just tired. Like, I'm tired of getting the remakes that don't try anything new, because I know it seems like, I guess it seems paradoxical to want, like, to make a remake of something and then decide that you're going to do something new with it, because even I would say, why aren't you just making a new game? But that, I think it's a little naive to say, because this is obviously influenced by the people that wanted it to happen in the first place. So it almost feels like it was an inevitability that this was going to happen. So, like, I accept that it had to happen, and I'm just glad that even if it, like, because I fully acknowledge I love what the ending did. I think it's a great game. This thing could fall hard,
Oh, yeah.
like fucking
Oh,
Icarus.
yes.
Like
Yeah.
fucking Icarus. Like it could just burst into flames at the end part and be like absolutely horrible. But like even then, I'm glad that it fucking at least tried, because I am just that sick of having these remakes come out that are like half steps between something new and just being the same. Because like first and foremost, I'm like, if I want to play Final Fantasy, like, and I try not to say this in the way that is meant to be like, this remake cannot be criticized, because that's not what I believe. The way that I mean this is in the sense that I can go play the original to see what that was like and consider that its own thing, rather than needing this remake to also be the original, even though I can still like. And I have to like constantly like grapple with the fact that I have friends and colleagues who I sympathize with hard, who were like, I wanted this game to be 1-to-1 because I couldn't get into the original. And I'm like, I wish for you that you could have gotten the 1-to-1 remake that you could get over the like combat or whatever was like preventing you from getting into a story that you otherwise like. Like, I sympathize with it, but it's not what I believe, and it's like, it's been tough. I'm kind of sick of talking about it with random people just because like I have to keep making these concessions, and like
I do have to.
While I
You're among
definitely
friends.
understand that
You're
want of like that 1-to-1 remake, but just with the better graphics and the action-based combat, I much prefer this route, because I feel like in the message being sent to me, at least, is they're not trying to invalidate the original. I think by doing it in this way, it retains the integrity of the original game. It doesn't come across like they're trying to replace it. So while on one hand I do get like wanting that 1-to-1 remake that just, so they can get the same experience, I gotta say, like, even if this turns out to be a total train wreck, I'm looking forward. I'm excited. I want to see it.
Because a train wreck you can't take
I
your
have to
eyes
bring up
away from. You love seeing a train wreck.
I think for me, that's kind of the weirdest part of all of this, is at the end of the day, I'm still kind of on the same emotional wavelength that I went into this thing in the first place with. I went into it deeply uncertain, deeply skeptical, trusting that like it looked good so far and it looked promising, and I still think like Nomura is a good director, so like I'm at least curious about everything he puts out. But again, is it going to be good in future? Is it going to completely tank? Is it going to go horribly wrong? Are they going to do every bad idea they could have done? There's literally no reason for me to believe they will or won't.
Well, here's the funny thing, is that a lot of people are upset because they think it invalidates, or sort of like it changes too much of the original story. And I find that a little funny, considering that the main plot of that whole big twist thing is that the original story is not changed, because it already happened.
Well,
the thing is, it already happened. Like the everything that's going on now, from what we can piece together, is after Advent Children. So that original timeline is still there and already happened.
Well, the thing
so
is,
it's not really affected.
Like, my big concern, and the biggest thing I feel this remake has left behind by a wide margin, and the most frustrating and heartbreaking thing I think this remake has left behind, is the fact that the original had a very consistent and very centered theme around grief and loss and learning to cope
So
with
Ryan,
that.
do you want me to break your mind a little bit from a comment I've seen that raised a really interesting point?
Yeah. Good.
So I have another point after this, but I really want to bring this up because it's something I've been thinking about that's, very interesting, in that, yes, it does take away from the death angle, and I'm of the thought that it's like I've seen Nomura and Nojima, write Kingdom Hearts, and they seem to have an adverse fear of killing off characters. But in relation to FF7 Remake and, retconning a lot of the deaths that happened, is they could potentially be setting up deaths that we don't expect so they have the same impact that they originally had.
That's entirely possible, except they already did a fake out with that, so I'm a little skeptical.
Yeah,
what I think is more likely, what I think is much more likely is they just don't have any interest in pursuing that theme,
and that's equally possible. But
because that theme originally came out of the that theme was originally a response by Hironobu
no, it
Sakaguchi.
wasn't. I've looked into that. That's actually in relation to FF3. Last I checked. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that like his mother passed long before that.
I'll double check, but there's clearly something there. And
Nomura. Also Nomura.
No,
Aerith's death. That was Nomura's idea.
No, I think what it wasn't necessarily that she died during that production or anything, but rather the idea of the live stream came from people in the afterlife still being around and protecting you after they're gone.
That was inspired by the passing of his mother, like, definitely. There is a document called An Oral History of Final Fantasy VII. I highly, highly recommend reading that whenever...
Yeah, that's what I thought. Because, like, I remember reading through that, too.
It talks about it there, but, like, that whole thing is just like a collection of interviews about the development of the original.
I mean, there's no reason it couldn't have like affected both of those games. You know, you lose a parent, that's an affecting experience. But what was it? Frickin' and like I don't want to be like this cynical about it, but like I can't help but feel like Nomura and crew looked at that aspect of the game and just went either I'm not comfortable doing this, or I don't care to do this, and the person who made us do this is no longer here.
Again, Nomura was the one who actually proposed Aerith's death.
It was his idea to kill Aerith, but what was it? That was, it was still one of those things that Sakaguchi signed off on, and there was still everything else around it in regards to the live stream and all of that, which I'm pretty sure the live stream was Sakaguchi.
Oh yeah. Like that, I just said that. Like, I just mean that, like, in relation to killing off a main character, it's like that was. You know,
oh yeah, no, that was.
So I don't think that's entirely.
Well, actually, no, that's a lie. That's actually wrong. The original plan was to kill off everybody except your party that you parachuted into Midgar with.
Yes,
Really?
That was the original plan. They were going to kill every party member except for the two people really, that you chose to go into Midgar to stop Hojo.
The person that stopped this plan was Nomura himself. He was like, no.
That's overkill. Let's just kill one of them.
Yeah.
Holy shit. Like, yo, like, I'm crazy. That's way too much for me.
Kitase was actually like...
God, imagine a time and place where Nomura is the voice of reason. Holy shit.
It was hilarious because Kitase was like, wait, did we actually do that? And then he was like, wait, I'm starting to remember.
Yeah. Look, I think we don't give Nomura too much credit sometimes. He can change his thoughts on things because he did go from having his characters wear 50 million belts to just maybe 2 or 3.
I mean, like, I think people go a little too far with Nomura sometimes. Like, I make fun of.
Absolutely.
He's an easy target. That's the real problem.
I make fun of a lot of the things that he does, but when I see people genuinely saying he's a hack, it kind of disheartens me because it kind of undervalues a lot of like the good things that he can do with his like kind of shock value-ish. Like, I've heard it described that the way that he writes is like mashing action figures together, and that's kind of accurate, but they say it in like a condescending way where I don't think it's like inherently a bad way to approach a story.
I guess it's like Platinum Games. Platinum Games is basically taking your action figures and mashing them together in the most epic ways.
They did put
that's
it
amazing.
in Final Fantasy VII, which was not written originally the same way that Kingdom Hearts was envisioned. I don't blame people. But I just think it goes a little too far sometimes.
I've been holding onto this for a while, so I wanted to bring it up before I forgot it. In relation to talking about the remake and, you know, it changing and, you know, the strong feelings people have and, you know, should it be a 1-to-1 or should it not be? I think the most interesting thing that this game brings up more or less unintentionally, because I've been kind of stewing on this a little bit. I think I've already told Ryan about this in a previous thing, but when you think about remakes in any other medium, whether it be books, TV, movie, what have you, it's typically made by other people. It's nearly like 99% of the time made by like an entirely different company. Depending on if it's like copyrighted or not, it's like a different rights holder, what have you. And it's just kind of accepted that it's like a new version, a new reimagining, a loose adaptation, what have you, What are they going to do? How are they going to tweak it, for a different audience, whatever they might do. And it's just kind of accepted. You'll still do like comparisons to Meet Joe Black versus the thing it originally was remaking. I can't remember what it's called. Or like The Wax House. Like, it's like you can still do those like, oh, how well does this do it? But it's not like, why isn't it exactly like the original? Why did they change this? It's just, I think this would have been better, or like, I think this thing handled this with better subtlety, what have you. Whereas with video games, there's much higher expectations on keeping faithful because it's typically made by the same developers, and in a lot of cases made by the same dev team or very similar dev team. So there's very high expectations from fans that are like, oh, they'll do this justice and they'll protect everything that needs to be protected. So I think that can be, in its own way, kind of stressful for creatives in that way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
for sure. Like the whole expectation thing is that I think that's the aspect of the whole meta commentary thing that I like the most. The idea of these people going and saying, okay, we have this property that millions of people love, that basically put Square on the map in the West, that basically reinvented JRPGs in the minds of many people. And like Dan said earlier, the amount of pressure that must have put on
it must have been
their
maddening.
heads is maddening. And so they have this idea to take their feelings of that matter and turning into a concrete narrative element. And at the end of the day, whether or not it's good or bad, because like we all said, it could easily be complete shit, you have to respect that in some degree. Whether you hate it or not, the idea of taking that raw emotion of how am I going to be able to live up to these expectations and then put it on screen, and it's like, this is what I was feeling, now you get to feel what I'm feeling. And isn't that what games are supposed to do at the end of the day, make you feel something more often than not? So whether or not it's doing something right or wrong, or whether or not it goes in a good or bad direction, I think it's admirable to have at least done that.
Yeah, like, I definitely respect the artistic risks that are being taken here. Like, whatever complaints I have about this game, I do not think that it's lazy or that they didn't care.
Yeah. There was so much love put into this product.
Honestly, I kind of directly sympathize with them. Because
yeah,
I know that lately, a lot of the time I've been saying almost uniformly that like even in this case, like, I love what they did with the ending. I thought the game was great. Even in this case, someone comes up to me like, would you rather they made a new Final Fantasy game with this team or a remake? I'd be like, make a new one. For the love of God, don't make the remake, because I don't like. That's like my answer in almost every case. Like, I'm super excited for like this Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition that's coming out, and I think that there are merits to its creation. But you come up to me again and you're like, would you have this Definitive Edition or would you have a new Xenoblade game? I'd be like, new game. Because I am so disillusioned by this almost paradoxical, like, people are like, it seems like there's the notion that people are sick of remakes or they want remakes still, and like, I can never find out what anybody really wants truly.
it fluctuates depending
Yeah, it really
on the
depends
product.
on what.
I don't
really
know
fluctuates.
if people want something new or if we want to keep making the old things as our new things, or if,
People
like,
don't know what they want.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's also I think something this game kind of benefits from is like I don't think people entirely know what they want until they get something maybe they don't want.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know I wanted Rufus Shinra to be the most badass motherfucker on the planet. But I love it. Because in the original, yeah, he's kind of cool, but he's nothing special. And then in this game, he just comes out looking amazing and having guns that propel him halfway
I'm sorry,
across
though,
the rooftop.
but his trench coat looked like it got through a lawnmower first. Like,
I love it. It looks
that's
so
the most
Nomura.
Nomura thing in this game.
Yes, exactly. I looked at that and I was like, that is so Nomura. I love it. And like his, Dark Star. I forgot that the dog's name was Dark Star.
I like how
And I was like, that is the most incredible name.
I like how some people go, well, you can't really you don't really know who to blame for what, but there's some things you can literally look at and just like laser point and be like, that was Nomura though.
yeah,
I don't care what you say.
Right,
Roche
exactly.
was Nomura.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, Roche was Nomura. Rufus was Nomura. Like, both of those guys, because you could just see the difference in tone a bit. Like, you can tell it went into that over-the-top. Because, for the most part, the story stays in this sort of balance of cheeky quirkiness and also, down-to-earth serious tones. But once those Nomura characters show up, things ramp up quite a bit in the tone. Like, Rush is just out of control, weird, and just even the characters in universe don't want anything to do with him. Like, that's how crazy he is. And then you have Rufus Shinra just coming out and gliding around the air with his dual pistols, and
I just thought of something.
Now,
I don't know who this is gonna speak to, but just imagine if you put Itsuno and Nomura in the same room together and told them to make a game.
Oh my
God, I wish that. I want that reality.
Oh my god.
It'd be terrible, but I want it.
What if Yoko Taro and
No,
Nomura
that's
were
too
put
much
in a room
crazy.
together?
In some ways, I feel like this is Final Fantasy VII Remake is like a stealth Kingdom Hearts release in the sense that people like, at least when general public goes into Kingdom Hearts, they know what they are. They know that a weird thing is going to happen.
A weird thing?
And that's well, many weird things are going to happen in Kingdom Hearts, but I think that's like a given when you buy it, almost. Like,
right.
So for me, the Kingdom Hearts people complaining about it is like almost just something people do at this point. And so I'm like, okay. So then when this comes out, it feels like a stealth Kingdom Hearts release because people didn't expect it to be that, but then you remove the curtain, and there are some elements that people will label KH-isms because they're slightly transgressive and strange. So I guess in a way the like controversial aspects of it are even though I don't think Nomura had everything to do with this game, I think they do kind of go back to him at the end of the day.
People place a little bit too much importance on like Kojima or like Sakaguchi. Like, these are collaborative works at the end of the day. So like, while there is someone in charge, that doesn't mean that they are solely responsible for every facet of the experience.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like Toriyama, the guy who I think he directed and wrote the 13 trilogy, like if you told me that he was part of the whole alternate timeline universe thing, I would not doubt it in the slightest compared to how 13-2 and Lightning Returns apparently took their story directions. Like, it would not surprise me in the slightest to hear that he had a big input on that. But
I'm
because
just
of the
like,
collaborative
I don't
nature
want
of
to be
things.
that guy, but from what I know about Final Fantasy VII, it's like, I don't know that the whispers inherently are a thing that people have a problem with, like, on the face of it, more so than it's just different from how it was initially established, because from what I understand, in Final Fantasy VII, the life stream is, like, meant to say that the planet is alive. Like, And is that not also a strange concept? Found your
to people's credit, one of the core reasons people don't like the ghosts, aside from like the change and being weird, is they're kind of frustrating to deal with, especially in a fight. So there is some like other reasons I've seen people not like them, is that they're not the best thing, and they do kind of sometimes lack some subtlety. And I think that tends to be my biggest issue with 7 Remake, is that like, if it was me, and I know this is kind of Nomura, like subtlety and him haven't been in the same room for quite a while. But yeah, I think some things could have like, softer touch. But, I get where they were coming from.
I certainly do too. It's just funny to me. Because, like, I guess it wasn't as jarring to me because even though I haven't finished Final Fantasy VII, I know almost everything about it. Like, I know why Cloud has Mako poisoning. Zack was part of his backstory, and Sephiroth was part of that. And then, like, all this shit. Like, I know how it ends. I know, like, all this shit. And I'm like... It did, like, I guess even then it didn't really surprise me the way that it surprised me in the sense that I didn't think they would do it, but, like, when I was finished with it, I'm like, well, at least they, I'm just glad they at least tried to, like, contextualize it in a way that is
there is totally in-universe justification for these things, and it's not as much up Nomura's ass as some people want to say it is. Like, Aerith being connected to the planet, it's like, okay, she's Cetra, that's, a valid excuse for that. I still don't entirely know how Sephiroth factors into time travel shenanigans. I'm sure they'll explain that somehow, like...
If I may put my dumb theory up there. So, at the end of Advent Children, he has that one line that basically goes...
I'll never be a memory.
Like, Cloud... Yeah. I will never be a memory. Like, Cloud goes like, oh, hey, like, just stay where you belong in my memories. And he's like, I will never be a memory. Kind of hinting at the fact that he will always be within the live stream. And if the live stream, according to this game, has ways of being able to manipulate fate and alternate universes or whatever, then one can reasonably assume then that means that he can exist in that timeline. And that the idea of that Sephiroth being Advent Children Sephiroth does kind of make sense. But again, that comes into the question of, okay, but what does that change? Like, it's just Advent Children Sephiroth. But the idea of it being connected to Advent Children like that, I think that's pretty valid.
There is definitely valid reasons for why things happen. Once you kind of, get over the shock of it, it's like, okay, you can very easily connect the dots and how these works, and it's not just fan
especially
fiction.
When you remember Nomura directed Advent.
Yeah, exactly.
I still love that movie. It's a guilty pleasure, man.
It's like, entertaining schlock.
I love it.
It's a fun watch. It's a good way to consume a bowl of popcorn.
As long as you skip to all the fight scenes.
No, you gotta watch the English dub and hear Dilly Dally.
Yeah, I was about to say, no, the dialogue's fine. Just skip over the bits where Dilly Dally Showy Showy is said.
That's actually...
I feel so bad for those translators.
That is such a Nomura line.
To be fair,
is that a line?
To be fair, I'm pretty sure the original Japanese, it's translated differently. Like
Zudu 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 Zudu. Yeah, it's basically some sort of like onomatopoeia. I think it is. Like it's not supposed to be a phrase, if I remember correctly.
It feels like it should just be blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, like I feel like she's supposed to be condescending,
to anybody,
but it doesn't come off that way.
Letterkenny, it's basically just saying pitter patter. It's just basically saying like that phrase of like pitter patter, let's get at her. It's just meant to be like, you're dilly dallying, let's go. Like that's I think what it's getting at, but it does get a little bit like, okay, Tifa, like calm down.
It just screams early 2000s English dubbing.
Yeah,
like,
I was going to say a big part of that, I think, comes back to the fact that the line reading isn't as strong as it could
Tifa's
be.
not a good.
No offense to the actress.
Wasn't directed well.
But
aren't they the same actors that go and voice them in different games? So it's not their fault. Like, definitely not. It's definitely the voice direction.
I will say in relation to I will say in relation to Advent Children, something we've kind of skipped over because we've really focused on the ending stuff, because that's where the meat of the discussion really has been. One thing a lot of people seem to forget about Nomura in terms of a director, and again, not the only person involved, but it is a trademark of his, I'd say, is he's really good at cutscene direction, specifically when it comes to action.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, fantastic at that. Like, there are certain like people think that, like, you know, being a director and everything, like, you have to say in all matters, but like you said, it's collaborative effort, and certain directors are just good at certain things. Tarantino is amazing at, like, writing banter between people, and so he's good at being able to direct the scenes around his own dialogue. I think this came from that interview from Metal Gear Solid 2 with, like, the translator, where she basically says that Steven Kubrick was a terrible writer, so he just had other people write and work with him as he directed, because you got to know your strengths. And Nomura's strength, by far, is his cutscene directions and his ability to get raw emotion out of people. You just need somebody to come in and, like in this case, like with Final Fantasy VII Remake, having some fantastic dialogue and written scenes in general between the main cast, that clearly there was somebody on that project that was, you know, working with him to flesh out the areas where he wasn't so great at.
I need to get this out because I can't be the only one that's noticed this. Did anyone get any Yakuza vibes from this game?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Especially
like,
in
the
Walmart.
honeybee
Holy
section
shit.
was full
Some
on
of the side
Yakuza.
quests especially, I'm like, someone played Yakuza. Like, come on.
that old dancing man, like, oh god, that guy was such a great character.
I think the fact that you can just do darts or the push-up minigame or the pull-up
The
not
pull-ups.
Yeah. The
whatever
squat.
minigame you do, the
Pull
workout
up,
thing.
yeah.
Squats.
Yeah,
that's
squats.
like having played a lot of Yakuza games. It's kind of how, like, you're going along the main plot, and then all of a sudden someone comes up to you and like, hey, you want to race mini cars or like do darts? That's kind of like the
sure, why
same
not?
structurally, almost.
The only downside
like,
is
I
that
just started
the
getting into
side quests
Yakuza
aren't
games
as
and I
well
love it.
written.
Yeah, okay, sure. They're
Yeah.
not as good.
They
They're not
definitely
on the
aren't.
same level
No,
as Yakuza.
I'm not saying that as like a oh, it's not as good as Yakuza. It's just like, yeah, like if like I would really like the side quest to be better, but yeah, you're not wrong. Like Ryan said, it's like Wall Market specifically feels very Yakuza. Like one of the added sections is like, oh yeah, while we wait, go to the Coliseum and fight some dudes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are certain
Or get a hand,
there are certain
or
side
get a
quests
hand
that
job,
I felt
you know.
like had it been done by the Yakuza team, they would have added more like flourishes to it, I guess. Like the whole thing with like the Angel of the Slums, like I think it had the right idea.
I never did that
and,
quest.
You know, it was all right, but like I really feel like if the Yakuza team had did it instead, like they would have amped it up a lot more. They would have like cranked it up to 11. They would have done something a lot crazier with it. But whatever. I still appreciate it as a fan of the series to see it like there's such clear inspiration. Like it had to be.
Yeah, but one thing, like if we're talking about things that I feel like they could expand upon, one thing that's a bit of an unsung hero in my opinion about this whole game is the choices you can make between the characters and the dialogue sections that directly impact certain scenes. Like, depending on who you talk to and the decisions you make with, like, the flower, talking to Tifa about, like, talking to Aerith about Tifa and vice versa and stuff like that, like, the person who you talk to in Aerith's garden is different. Like, you can have Aerith, who I think most people got because of how the choice
I got Tifa.
Algorithm works. Most people, but you can get Tifa, and in my opinion, as much as I loved the Aerith scene because she tells him like, you know, like, hey, don't fall in love with me because she knows what's gonna happen, the Tifa scene is by far the best because she just breaks down crying over the Sector 7 plate, and I found that was a great scene, and I'm so mad that I missed
Tifa,
it. Because you can also
Tifa
get
in
Barrett.
That cutscene?
You can also
is
get
Tifa in
Barrett.
that cutscene the same thing where it's like it's hinted at as a dream?
No, it's not a dream.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not a dream. It's only if
Okay,
Aerith is
because
there.
the Aerith,
Because
I
Aerith
thought that
is-
was just. I didn't even know that was like a changeable scene. I thought that was just like a locked-in
Nope.
thing.
Nope.
No, I thought no, you can change it, and I figured that out when I was looking up scenes on YouTube. And go look up the Tifa scene; it's genuinely
Barrett
great.
one
You
is
can have
also
Barrett there
like,
too.
The makeup of your team when you're fighting Sephiroth is different depending on your affinity, like your secret affinity with people based on. The
I
decisions
didn't
you
know
made.
that.
Oh.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I
I
heard
didn't
that other
know that.
people had
Yeah.
vastly different.
I thought it was just
I
completely
remember I was
random.
watching somebody's stream, like, because I was like, I want to see what they think of the ending. So I'm watching them stream, and then they get a completely different party to fight Sephiroth with new dialogue, and I'm like, what? Like,
I didn't know that.
because the
pretty
party I
great.
had was, I had Cloud, and then I
Yeah,
got Tifa,
so did
and then I
I.
got Aerith, and I'm like, okay, Barrett's
I got Tifa and
in the
Barrett.
background, so I'm like, I guess that makes sense. The 3 headliners of Cloud, Tifa, Aerith fighting Sephiroth.
No, I got Tifa and Barrett on my playthrough, and then Aerith came in right at the
But
end.
like, supposedly it's according to like all of these weird decisions that you make. That, and I think it's kind of cool.
It's
that
very-
it's made that way, because the decisions aren't like. It's not like you say yes to somebody or you say like. It's like you don't even know that they're happening.
Yeah, it's not Mass Effect where you can know where your choices are gonna go. It's basically like, hey, do you like this girl? Do you like this girl? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? And then behind the scenes, it figures out what your preferences of certain characters and changes the story a bit to accommodate that. Like, isn't there a moment where you're in the sewers and you can choose between Tifa and Aerith of who you wake up?
Yeah, you can pick whoever you want to talk to, and you'll have different dialogue depending on who you pick.
Yeah.
When you fall in the sewers. For
Yeah,
the
and
first
that
time
and that
between
does
the
change
10.
things.
10 had the same mechanic, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, but like my biggest thing about that is the reason why I call it sort of like an unsung hero is that I think that's maybe where they're gonna take the direction of the story, if not think, but where they could take it, where people are going saying, oh well, they can't change the Aerith death scene or whatever, and I agree. I feel like maybe they shouldn't change it, but maybe they could if they did it right, but maybe that element, that mechanic will get expanded upon in the sequel. And that now that we're in completely uncharted territory, maybe that mechanic will be a much bigger thing than we think it is. And if that's the case, that would be fantastic. To have everybody's story be, on some level, pretty drastically different depending on your choices in the game that you don't even know you're really making. That'd be kind of cool in my opinion.
Well, I guess like what's everyone's hopes for the next game? Like what would you ideally like to see, or what do you think they're gonna do?
I'll let the people who've played
Yeah,
the game
let's
fully
start with Ryan and we'll
answer
work
first.
our way through the call.
Yeah.
I would like the next game to just be Tetsuya Nomura coming to my house and giving me $1,000. Like, honestly, I don't know. I genuinely don't know. Like, at this point, if they put out a 1-to-1 remake of like the whole thing, then yeah, cool. I'm here for it. I'd be super down for that. If they curveballed it really hard and did something really different and unique and changed a ton of plot stuff, yeah, I guess. Like we've kind of established at this point, the original is always going to be there. So, like, at this point, at this stage, I think it's clear that this isn't necessarily a replacement for that. It's functionally a new game entirely. So, if they want to take those swings, like, yeah, no, go for it. All I really ask, I guess, is that the gold saucer slaps.
Yeah.
I'm sure
they
it will if
they nailed Wall Market. I think they're gonna do fine. with the gold
That's the
saucer.
one thing I'm really excited for after seeing Wall Market. I walked in there, and after 5 minutes, I'm going to be like, oh, they're going to do this to Gold Saucer. Oh my god.
Well, here's the big thing: are they gonna still make you buy GP? That's the big question. Because Final Fantasy VII Machina Bridge, like, made me laugh so hard about that, basically attributing it to like microtransactions, where you have to pay money in order to get fake currency to get into this
What if the
place.
joke comes full circle and there are actual microtransactions
Oh
for
my
GB?
god, no. Shut your mouth. Shut your mouth. No.
No one let Nomura listen to this.
No, we're not putting out that energy out into the universe. We're not doing that. But, like, I really don't know where they're gonna go with the sequel, and that.
Oh right, and
is
I'm sorry, but
Oh, yeah,
one
go
more
ahead.
thing while I'm thinking about it. In the sequel, they really need to let Sid say
Yeah.
fuck.
Yeah.
They
Yes.
really need
Yes.
That's my one big gripe with this. That's my one gripe I haven't mentioned yet. Is this game's oddly kind of sanitized in a couple ways.
Hey, they let Aerith say shit.
Yeah, and
I
that
think
was great.
they're starting
That's the best use of cursing in the game. But at the same time,
Yes.
like, why doesn't Barrett say anything like harsh? You know, like he cursed all the
Yeah.
time in the original, and here he's not any worse about it than Cloud. And that I'm willing to let go because Barrett was a bit more borderline, but Sid is a goddamn sailor.
To be
Yeah, no,
totally
Sid
fair,
has
in the
to
original
swear.
script, Barrett was nowhere near the potty mouth that he is in the English translation. Yeah.
Like,
Really?
Yeah, that's fair. Which is one of the reasons why I'm willing to let that slide a bit more with Barrett specifically. But Sid,
Yeah, there's no way. Like, if he's not smoking like a
Cigar.
cigarette every 5 seconds and has like, or cigar, excuse me. Yes, that's correct. He's not smoking a cigar and just getting a new one every single fight and swearing like a sailor. Then they drop the ball on that character.
Here's the
I
thing
completely
with
agree with
Sid,
Ryan on
This
Yeah.
is what I really hope that they do. I think that they should change the nature of his relationship with, I think it's his wife.
His wife?
Yeah.
Shira.
It's...
Oh yeah, that's something they're gonna have to work
Sierra.
around
Yeah.
hard now that everything is gonna be shown in detail and it's not the extrapolation of the original.
That's... As much as I love the original,
Yeah,
that is
or
one
they could-
part that has aged horribly. And they need to fix that.
Yeah.
like, I don't think it necessarily needs to be fixed per se. I don't want to defend this too hard for obvious reasons, but
I think I know where you're going with this, and I kind of the same mindset.
But at the same time, like, I definitely think he should 100% remain kind of mean, kind of dismissive, maybe even a little cruel, not necessarily abusive.
Yeah, like borderline on abusive,
like,
but more just a
borderline
shitty
as
abusive.
far as Sid is concerned, like, Shira is someone who cost him his dreams. Like, that's
Yes.
the whole cornerstone of their relationship. So, like, he does still need to treat her
I'm
like
not
that
saying
in
he
some
shouldn't
capacity.
be angry at her. However, I think something that an important change that needs to happen is that he needs to realize after the fact, not just that he was wrong because it was a misunderstanding, but also that the way that he had been treating her was wrong. He needs to make that realization.
Well, I kind of think he does in the original game. Like, when you get up into the rocket to get the huge materia and all of that, like, in that, one cooling system explodes next to him, that's basically the exact moment he's like, oh god, I've been just the world's biggest jackass for about a decade.
Okay.
What have I done?
Yeah, and I think when you're falling back to the planet, he kind of has some dialogue that goes there. But I kind of see
It
what
could
you're
definitely
saying.
be done better. There
Yeah, it
definitely
could
should have been a
definitely-
scene where we
definitely.
see him actually go to like, a
Exactly.
place where she is, and
Yes.
they have a moment, which doesn't
Yes.
happen. Which
That
yeah,
would
that's
fix it.
perfectly right for. That's the kind of
Yes, yes,
things I'd like
exactly.
to see expanded upon.
Yeah. Okay, I guess it's my turn. Well, first, I want them to really delve more into the combat system. Not necessarily go full action or anything, but definitely think about implementing some things that, like a jump button, you know, air cancel or whatever. Just some things from the action genre, just a little bit more, not too much, to make it a much smoother experience. Really fix hard mode, or at least find something different to do with it other than just taking away your items. But in terms of story, I think the main thing that I want out of it is for them to just kind of keep going in that direction that they're doing right now, where it's this mix of reverence, but also understanding that some things need to change. And so if certain story beats change, like, how Yuffie and Vincent are
they can't be optional
characters
anymore.
Yeah, if they have to put the work
they
in,
can't be
they're
optional,
not going to be
because
optional.
No way.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, there's no way you can have somebody just go and completely ignore Yuffie, which always made a weird sense to me why they were so optional, considering that they're in almost everything past the original game. So if Yuffie's gonna be there, you can kind of keep an element of that surprise. Like, she will show up, but at what point changes depending on, like, maybe certain actions or something, or where you go first or something if they make it overworld. Like, certain things like that. Like, they still keep the overall, tone and chain of events, but they change it up enough for it to feel different. And at the end of the day, all I really want for them is to keep telling the story that they feel both they and the fans want. Because I feel like that was basically this game in a nutshell. It was, what do we want, but what do the fans want, and let's see if we can find something that kind of meshes well with that. And I think with the ending, they did pretty good. So I think that's pretty much what I want.
Okay.
Dan?
Which Dan?
Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I get really confused when people say, I get really confused when people say that. That's what most people call me.
You can go ahead.
But having not finished the original, there's not like a lot of frame of reference that I have other than what people have told me about how things happen. So I guess I'm wondering how they're going to structure the game. Because from what I understand, it becomes a lot more open at a certain point.
Yeah, basically
And
right
I'm
where
not
we're at is where it opens up.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, how many resources are they going to put into that? Because people are saying like, oh, we'll just make it open world, but I don't know if you understand what that means.
Yeah.
I have been the person that has said over and over among my group of friends that I hate when games go open world when they don't need to. So many of these games could be fixed by having hub worlds or zones. Final Fantasy XII feels like you're going on an incredibly long journey and has intricately detailed zones that you go through. And even though they're, sectioned off, zone by zone, it still feels like you're going through this large area because it's all still connected into one major area.
Yeah.
I've never understood the obsession of taking a game or series or whatever that's typically linear and then saying open world, because most of the time the people who are making the open world don't have experience with it and they mess it up by putting in pointless side quests, or the world doesn't feel doesn't have enough life to it. And it's really easy to mess up and make it quantity over quality. So I'd rather them, if they're gonna go with an overworld thing, to kind of make it just traversal and nothing else.
Fuck that. I want a hyper-realistic 100-foot cloud walking around like miniatures of the towns. That's what I want. Give it to me.
Yeah. That's what's up.
I'm not joking. I want that. Give it to me.
But maybe it's just me maybe it's just me playing Final Fantasy 15 right now and seeing how janky the open world segment is compared to the more linear ones later on. Maybe that's just my opinion being colored, but I feel like that would be probably a good idea.
Well, I think taking the idea of 15's open world and kind of refining it a bit, because 15 has an open world technically. There's definitely some stuff you can find, but it's not an open world in the way that Horizon Zero Dawn is an open world. Most of the time you're spending it in the car. The car does not go off-road. You can't really drive the car, traditionally speaking. In the way you can...
You technically can once you get those upgrades.
Yeah, but
Like
that, but by that
it
point,
does
that's
take a while
super
to
late
get it,
game.
though.
Yeah, you can just
Yeah,
you can just
exactly.
press
And
X and it'll
the
just go
equivalent of
straight.
that in here would be getting the high wind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm
Oh my
thinking.
God.
Like, do you like? How long did it take for them to make that one section of Final Fantasy 15? And then
God,
think about
too
how
long.
big the world of Final Fantasy
Oh,
VII
yeah.
is.
Yeah.
And I have no fucking idea what they're like. I don't know that they could even do that.
Yeah, I
don't
don't
think
know
they
how
could.
they'd handle that.
I just think going to town, like, people decry linear as, you know, some sort of bad term, and I've always defended it because it's not necessarily linearity that you have a problem with. Most people have a problem with, most people have a problem is with not enough variety in when you're going from A to B. If there's not enough, because Final Fantasy X is linear as all hell. But there's still a lot of things that it makes you do, like from swimming sections to blitzball to, you know, combat to exploration. There's a lot of things to do as you're going from A to B. And the reason why Final Fantasy XIII was really hated was because literally all it is walk and fight for 40 hours. So, if they go with a more linear route instead of an open world one, I wouldn't be too mad. But I do understand that some people would.
I just think it's an inevitability. Like, I don't know that it's even possible for them to do open world route without it being completely hampered. Like, so I think they just have to make it like, I can't see, like, what I can see is them letting you maybe choose which towns to go to, but like, there's not actually, like, you just pick which one to go to and they take you there, like.
So like Final Fantasy 10, I think it was, when you're on the airship and it just
I've
kind of.
never played 10, so I don't know.
Oh, I think it's either 10 or 10-2.
10-2.
You go on the airship and then it takes you to the sort of overworld map where it has different locations that you fast travel to.
Yeah, I think they would have to do something like that.
Yeah, agreed.
Either
I'm kind of in the
that's-
same boat. I don't think they'll be able to
Yeah.
effectively make a large open world with the
or
level
it's
of
gonna be
quality that they're
like-
aiming for.
Yeah, I'm
Or it's
not
gonna
sure
be
how they
like
can
like you
handle it
brought up
otherwise.
FF12 or something similar like Dragon Quest VIII, where it's just gonna be like zones.
Zones are so underrated.
They are.
Like, because, like, let's take a section like this, like you're in a giant forest, and multiple zones will each have their own, you know, distinct elevations and increases and, you know, ways to travel, because they're made, you know, as they're supposed to be one individual area per section of that giant forest. And it still feels like a journey because you're still in the forest and by the time you get out of it. So it feels like you're going from a long stretch because you see the environment around you changing as you're going from zone to zone. So personally, I feel zones are underrated, and I think that would be a good way to take it.
Yeah, I can 100% agree with that. I think
Yeah.
12 is.
Yeah, no, I completely
think 12
agree with
would
that.
be the best middle ground of like straight linearity and total uncontrolled open world, especially if we're gonna go with the level of scale that's been upped. Like, Midgar was not that big compared to what Remake is, so if we're gonna kind of continue on a similar scaling, yeah, like Gaia would be too large and too open with not a lot to do. Because in comparison, there's not much
Gaia
to
would have to
do
be
in that
Star
open
Citizen
area
levels of big.
outside of random encounters until you hit towns.
Yeah, the random encounters are really make the overworld like a lot longer
Yeah.
than it actually is. Once you turn that off in like the new remastered versions, it really doesn't take too long to traverse the open world.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just finding out where you have to go that's the problem sometimes.
If I were to speculate on what's to come, or what I would like to see, or what I think might be going on, is that, yeah, what we said, I really have trouble imagining that they're gonna do complete open world, and if they do, I'm gonna be a little skeptical, but I'll go in with an open mindset. In terms of like the changes that are gonna happen, I don't know if it's gonna be too drastic. Like they said in interviews, it's like we know what needs to be protected, and they understand their game and how important it is to people. I do hope that they do keep that idea of death and grief as like a core theme, but in maybe play around with expectations so it does have that impact, like I said earlier, of like, oh, you thought, you were so used to it being Aerith that you didn't expect, Tifa dying or something, and then maybe we get to see what the character dynamics of grief are when it's a different character.
Yeah,
because I think that's one thing this
I
game
agree with
really
that.
did well above everything else, like all things considered, is it did a really good job with the character dynamics. Like Tifa or Cloud and Barrett's relationship was like, I think, one of the best parts of this game in terms of if we were talking about what improved from the original, because you genuinely get to see Barrett coming around to Cloud.
Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely see a lot of Barrett's more sentimental side of things, because the thing about Barrett is that he is an emotional man. He just puts up, not a facade, but he over exaggerates that passion and makes it into this, big Mr. T kind of like speech maker. But those moments where he's talking to Marlene and he's at Aerith's mom's house and just has those really genuine moments, really shows you the
he has to be the
depth
leader
to
of
his
Avalanche,
character,
so
and
he
I
has
love
to put on his leader face and hype everyone up. But as soon as he doesn't have to be that, he can kind of come out of that. But in terms of like what they can do with that, it'll be very interesting, because they do seem to generally understand how to handle these characters. That's one thing I have absolute complete faith in going from this game into the next, is that like, okay, they understand these characters fairly well. I have no doubt about that. So it'll be interesting to see maybe how they play around with that in relation to making changes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Agreed. 100% agreed. Is anybody else?
Yeah, any other burning?
I already said I
thoughts on
wanted the old school world map, hyper realistic. That's what I want. Just I don't need anything else.
I'm trying to think if there was like anything from the original game that's a little weird, like other than like the gold saucer and everything on the gold saucer, like anything. I want to know how they're gonna tackle. Oh my god, I feel terrible for forgetting.
Dine.
Barrett's friend, the guy, Marlene's dad.
Oh fuck, I can't remember his name.
Well, like how are they gonna tackle that? Because that's some.
On the
that's some
flip
pretty
side,
heavy shit.
I really can't wait to see Barrett in his little sailor outfit.
Oh, it's gonna be
my
so
god!
good. Oh, wait, no,
Red 13. Yes, you have Red 13 in the sailor outfit.
God, there's some really goofy shit in this game.
Having played it, I want to see a better version of the thing they make you do when you're marching.
Oh, and Junon.
Oh my
right.
god!
I want
the
to see
worst
them remake
minigame
that in a
ever.
way that doesn't feel weird and confusing.
Yeah.
It is so bad. It is such a
that part
terrible
sucked.
minigame.
It is.
I love.
I mean, I
how
thought it was
Mission Abridged made
funny
fun
when
of
it was
that.
happening, but it was like trying to play that was like, what is going on?
Well, trying to be good at it is impossible. It serves its purpose well of making you look like a clumsy dick, but like.
I'm
as
also just
something
wondering
that's
what
meant
that
to be
will look
played.
like if Cloud will be good at that, like he's suddenly good at dancing for some reason.
That was
Or-
so
That was
good.
genuinely funny.
If you were
like,
looking at it.
I didn't care. I didn't care if it made no sense that he knew how to dance.
Dude, it
I
was
just loved every
fabulous,
second of it.
Okay.
Like the honeybee section turning into this big cabaret thing was perfect. I loved it. But the rhythm game portion of it though could have used some work.
Yeah, if I can turn off that
Like-
part of it and just watch it as a cutscene, I'd be totally content with that.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, like
Same here.
like
yeah.
it's a great scene. It's a terrible rhythm game. It's absolutely awful as a rhythm game. The prompts aren't even on beat. It
Yeah,
bugs the
same.
hell out of me.
It's not only that they're not on beat, it's that they've usually like obstructed
Yeah.
till the last second.
And I get that that's kind of the point with those,
Still garbo.
but it's still, bad. Yeah.
Yeah, it's still garbage. But the emotions that I felt while playing it.
I feel like
I
I
think
just
my
didn't
jaw
really
couldn't
dwell
have
on it
been
'cause it
further
was
down
such
on
a
the
short
ground.
little thing, and I was kind of like, like not the greatest way they could have implemented that, but I was so like enraptured by the moment that I wasn't even really paying attention to the minigame. So
I just love when Aerith is, I love that the game switches perspectives every now and then. Like after you get the hand massage, it goes over to Aerith. And again, once you get out of the honeybee, Aerith is there like trying to talk to Cloud, and he's just like, please, I don't want to talk about it. Like
yes, nailed it. Moving on.
I was surprised by how
point. Yes,
much
exactly.
the humor actually landed. Like it.
Oh yeah.
FF7 was always really funny. It was a very
but
insightful game.
That doesn't mean that the remake was going to capture that, but they did. They did.
Well,
exactly. Yeah, they captured.
I'm kind of taking this a little bit from Super Bunny Hop when he talked about Metal Gear Solid 3. Is that maybe it's just how Westerners view things? Is that like there seems to be this thing where like camp can't work in relation to drama. And like I think that's kind of where 7 really benefits, is like it has campy moments that are funny, but it equally pays that off with like really, traumatic scenes that are very impactful. And I think, Remake actually does a really decent job of capturing that mentality of like, oh yeah, like, Sector 7 just fell down hours after we had a fun little experience in Wall Market. And it did a really good job of keeping those two tones together, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. Because camp makes you usually endeared to the characters more. And if you're more endeared to the characters, then you care about them more when something bad happens. So using camp to elevate the character interactions and your admiration of them is a decent way of making sure that you care about
and in a way,
story.
and this is what I think I'm going to more or less take from George, is that like, I think camp kind of like brings your defenses down a little bit at the same time. Like it almost kind of like puts you at ease, and then when it wants to go for the like gut punch, then it can.
Yeah, it definitely works like that. Like Metal Gear Solid 3 has so many gut punches, especially the final scene, that it's like, it was all worth it to have that camp in there.
In the next game, that is something that I'm sure they'll keep in mind. Have the fun stuff at Gold Saucer, and then immediately juxtapose it with like Barrett's backstory.
Yeah, agreed. That would be probably a good way to do it, and especially if they keep, since they have the choices of the different girls that you're talking to, they keep the dating scene where you get to go on a date with either Tifa or Aerith.
Also, I want better control. I know this is more or less just how the game worked in this case. I'm sure it'll be in the next one. I really hope I can actually pick my party in the next one.
Yeah,
like that's what I mean. I trust that.
There's
because
Midgar always had like way more sections where the party was naturally split up, but like from here on out, it's pretty uniform, or at least it should be, unless they radically change.
Yeah, there's just a couple times where it's like, Barrett's right there. Why can't I switch him in? Or I had a couple moments like that, but I was like, just how the game is, whatever.
Yeah, the game just chooses for you the entire time, which was a little weird, but I guess it wasn't a big deal.
Most of the time it did justify it, so I wasn't too bothered by it.
Yeah, I think the only part where they it was like a false choice was when you're in Hojo's lab and you have to switch between the two characters. Like they give you the ability to constantly switch back between the two.
You had to do it.
But it like you really only need them. Exactly. You have to do it at specific points. So it wasn't really a choice per se. So I don't know why they just didn't make that a one-time switch and then make you wait until you get back until.
I guess they just wanted to get like in case there were stuff that you wanted to get before you made the switch. I don't know.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, Hojo's lab was a bit of a drag. Not gonna lie.
It isn't even just.
It wasn't so bad at the beginning, but then by the end, it's just like, dude, okay.
I feel like Hojo's Lab, though, is kind of emblematic of like a greater issue of the game, of this need to make Midgar feel like a more, quote, like complete experience. And they just like bloat the game with a bunch of shit.
Yeah.
All the time. And that's just one part where they do stuff like that.
Well, the one thing I came up against, though, because that was one of my original complaints as well, but the thing that clicked with me is, like, Okay, the stuff that we would probably count as bloat, as padding, is probably the train graveyard, probably to some extent the sewers, and probably Hojo's lab.
What?
You know what all three of those have in common? They're one of the few levels where you get to play with Aerith on your team. Without those, there would only... If you remove... Like, there's only 5 chapters in total where you can play with Aerith as, like, a proper party member. So, removing or trimming any one of those means you now have substantially less time with Aerith.
that's entirely fair.
Sure,
That's
okay,
a fair point.
fair enough.
Yeah.
Actually, when you put it that, I never even thought of it that way.
Yeah, I didn't even think about
again,
that.
it was one of those... It was a complaint I totally had, but once that clicked, I was like, okay, I'm not a huge fan of it, but...
Okay, but the
what
train,
else are you going to
the
do?
train graveyard.
Well,
come
I've never
on.
been a big... Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
The train graveyard,
graveyard
is just
is
poorly
fine
designed.
to a
That has
point.
nothing
It's
to do
just-
with padding. It's just a bad level.
No. The train graveyard is fine up to a point. Once Aerith has that weird vision where she's being surrounded and she sees herself as a kid crying,
That was a
where the
good- that was
train
a good
graveyard
That's when I
should have
thought
been.
it ended, and then it
After
just
that,
kept
it
going,
shouldn't-
and I was like, okay, why?
That's where I thought it was going to end. Like, I
feel
didn't
like I'd
personally
have less
mind
of
it
a
too
problem
much.
with it if they had tweaked it so that... I think the major problem for me is that they really should not have learned about the plate falling before the train graveyard. Like, I know that's how it happens in the original, but, like, if they were going to put the train graveyard in, they really should have had them learn about the plate falling.
Yeah, and
after
you know,
the
they-
train
I
graveyard.
think
Well,
To
then,
be
then
fair,
again, like, what would the point of, like, going to Don Corneo be in the first place, then?
But here's the thing: did he specifically say? And this is not me defending it, but it's more of like just trying to see it from the other side. Did he specifically say when they were going to do the
I
plate?
know what you're going to say. They do have, like, a flimsy justification.
I know
in
it's
the
kind of
idea
flimsy,
that, like-
but at the same time, like, it's more because we know in the original game that the plate's gonna fall directly
also
after
you also
Don
get
Corneo
plenty of
in the
cutscenes
sewers.
while you're in the ghost train, or like leading up to it. You see the like fight going on, so you the player know what's happening.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
where I was gonna go to. Yeah, that is when it should have been like, okay, like, don't show the helicopters and everything going towards the pillar until about maybe halfway or 3/4 of the way through. That is
You
where
know
their
what the-
mistake
you know what
was.
the-
They kept trying to
you
be
know what
like,
the
oh, hey,
easiest
Shinra's
fix
going
is?
there.
Make the ghost train yard sequence a side mission.
Yes. Or at least up till that era.
Like if they wanted to
weird
make
vision
the
thing, I don't know.
Elgar
Just-
section of it.
Yeah, I was about to say Eligor would be... He
Yeah.
should be optional. Especially since he wasn't even, like, an enemy in the original game at all,
I'm pretty sure he
that
was.
I can
actually.
think
I
of.
think he's like a secret thing you fight.
I genuinely can't remember.
I could be wrong. I remember someone telling me that he's.
Yeah, I don't remember.
But I think, all things considered, I think we all pretty much... Even if we have some things that we're kind of mixed of or we critique, I think we all genuinely had a positive experience or even a great experience
Oh, yeah.
with the game.
Yeah, no, I absolutely loved it overall. Like, we can sit here and nitpick all day, and, like, there's definitely some legitimate grievances to be had, but overall, like, anyone who looks at this and sees anything other than a brilliantly crafted labor of love that a lot of people clearly invested huge amounts of time and effort into, like, they're not seeing the same thing
Yeah.
I'm seeing.
Yep.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah,
There's no
basically.
way in hell you can, like, tell me that this was not a labor of love.
Like I said, I will accept a lot of critiques about this game, but the two I will not is that it was lazy
In
and
general,
that they didn't care.
I detest that criticism. Like, when people try to make that assumption about other creators saying that they were lazy, I fucking hate that. People,
It more
Yeah.
often than
Yeah.
not comes from people that
Yeah.
don't really create themselves, and not to be like shitty and be like,
They don't
well,
understand the
we're all
process.
creators, so we know. But like, typically, it's people that don't really understand what goes into even making a game. And yeah, it's just like a knee-jerk reaction that just
Yeah.
they're angry, so they want to be
Yeah.
pissed
And,
at people.
you
that
know,
they can
and I totally
place blame on.
understand feeling burned and, you know, wanting to lash out, but that doesn't mean you know the people that worked on it on such a level that you can accuse them of being lazy. Like, that's just a completely unfair assessment on your part. Like,
Yeah.
it's so you like, and it also comes from not even having basic knowledge of just how much work that goes into making a game. Making even a bad game is hard work. So yeah, just people, please don't say things like that. You really don't understand what you're saying when you do that.
Yeah, it's like when you see a bad movie or something, having worked on film sets, I was like, you don't see the amount of hours that, like, the grips or any of the camera operators are busting their asses to see a product that goes on screen that could end up being a complete
it takes
piece of crap.
hours. It takes
but they
hours
still put
to
in
get the lighting right of a single shot.
Oh my god, it takes hours to set it up, to take everything out of the truck, set it up, get it ready for the shoot, and then you could only get like just a couple of shots, and then you're done for the day and have to put everything right back in that truck. Like, that takes so much effort, and it could be all for nothing. So when people say that a game development studio or a certain thing is lazy, yeah, I'm right there with you. It's really bad.
You can say they phone it in, like, they kind of phoned it in on this section, or this part slips a little bit, but like just throwing them under the bus, especially if you haven't played it, if you're just making knee-jerk reactions, yeah, I don't know how much I can give you on that.
Yeah. King, your thoughts?
Do you want to send us home?
I mean, that's like my ethos. My ethos is that people should stop using the word. Like, I think lazy is a word that is like, I don't want to say that you should never use it, but like
it's an often
misused word. I try not to use it much ever, because whenever I try, like, if I were to ever try to put that word into a critical thing, I'd be like, I don't know if this is what I mean when I say lazy, like if that's even what I'm trying to say.
There's often better words.
Like, I think it's a word that has its uses depending on the context, without question. But like, I struggle to think of like critiquing terms that are like both more overused and more poorly used more often than not.
Overrated.
What's funny about the word lazy is that saying something is lazy is itself kind of lazy.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Generally, yeah.
I don't know, maybe overrated is kind of
that's
overused.
Up there too.
Yeah. Like, it's overrated. Like, isn't that just, I don't know, your opinion, man? Like,
well, that's just you caring about the outside context more than the thing itself.
Yeah, if there's anything that I've personally learned over the last year or so, it's basically like, look, at the end of the day, just whatever the internet says doesn't matter. Like, in terms of how you feel about something, recognize the flaws or point out like the good things and try to understand the opposite side of things. But at the end of the day, it's your opinion that matters and how you feel about a product.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, man. You gotta pick your side on the war.
Yeah, I'll see you guys on the battlefield.
Right. Yeah, for real.
Which way do you feel about Final Fantasy VII Remake? Good or bad? Isn't that the best question to be asked by somebody?
Yeah, as they like
which of these
as they
two
hold up a gun.
People in the comments
as
tell
they
us.
hold up a gun, like
Good or bad?
It's like, well, but you tell them, like, well, but actually, it's kind of complicated. It's
No,
like,
if you say the two words, well, actually, you immediately get a shot in your face. Just like no, well, actually, you just have to do a side. No gray area.
What I will say to end this is to just try to understand people.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
This is what I've learned through this, is that there is not enough understanding going around. Like,
I think Charlie Booker said it best, where it's like, remember when everything on the internet was meh? I kind of miss meh. It's like,
where did the general indifference
okay.
go?
Right?
Oh god, that's a discussion for another day.
this thing was a thing that was meant to be. It was never meant to not be divisive. It was always going to be. And the least we could do is just understand when people do or don't like it. That's kind of why I'm like. This will probably be like the last major kind of discussion I have about this game.
Probably.
Yeah, same here. We have been going for
We've
like,
been going on for a
almost
while.
4
That's
hours?
why I was
Yeah,
like,
get in there,
probably
3
about
hours.
Time to wrap it up.
3.5. Yeah.
But it was a good discussion nonetheless.
Absolutely,
It's a
we got
great
everything
discussion.
out of the way.
I just have other Final Fantasy games to play.
Yeah, I need to beat 15 and get this
I'm
stranglehold
gonna do
it's
something
having over my
completely
life.
different and play Silent Hill.
Probably
Unlike you
why it's
maniacs, playing
Yes.
more Final Fantasy.
Hey, look, when I go into something, I go like into that subject hard. I don't have hobbies. I have temporary.
You do you, fam.
Yeah.
Well,
I guess that's it.
yeah, I mean, I guess that's it, really.
Final Fantasy VII's good. Go buy it.
Yep.
No, it's not. It's not.
Total shill. PS4 provided by PlayStation.
Why?
10 out of 10, it's okay.